And my friend Allie lives there, and that's Allie.
That's Allie.
The special meeting of the Monroe Township Board of Education, August the 19th, will now come to order. Mr. Tharney, would you mind leading us in the pledge to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Gorski.
Ms. Arminio.
Here.
Mr. Braverman. Here. Ms. DeMayo.
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Mrs. Kolopanowicz.
Here.
Mr. Nostine.
Here.
Mr. Prezioso.
Yes, here.
Mr. Poi.
Here.
Mr. Ryback.
Here.
Mr. Zarneski. Mr. Board President, you have a quorum present this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gorski. In accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law, the Monroe Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted August the 14th, 2015, at all schools, the Home News Tribune, the Asbury Park Press, and filed with the clerk of the municipality. At this time, we're going to move to our first public forum. Please keep in mind that any remarks or comments or questions should pertain to whatever is on tonight's agenda. You are also, if you come to the microphone, please state your name and address, and if you have any group affiliation, to include that as well. And we would appreciate your keeping your remarks, questions, statements so that they are 3 minutes or less in duration. And all comments, questions, etc., are to be directed to the president of the board. And I believe that's it. So do we have anyone at this time that would like to address a question or concern with our agenda?
Robert Roach, 18 Muirfield Boulevard. And I'm involved with Monroe Citizens for Responsible Government. I guess that's a new thing we start to have to do now, huh? Giving group affiliations. But anyhow, what I would like to just ask the board in their deliberations on their budget philosophy, that they remember that they really have two responsibilities. One, to determine the budgets that's necessary to provide a quality education for the students, but also to consider the burden on the taxpayers for the taxes that the taxpayers will have to incur in that in their philosophy decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Any other members of the public? Okay, seeing no one else, I will then close the first public forum, and we will now engage in a discussion on budget philosophy. Dr. Kozak? I'll use this. Oh, you have one. Okay.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. President, and hello again to the Board of Education and to our members in the audience. I would ask that before we begin the budget philosophy, the discussion of the budget philosophy, that we remember that this is it's a critical initial stage of the budget process. This is the very beginning of a process that really spans from August through March or April of next year. And there's a lot of work that the Mr. Gorski, myself, Dr. Alvich, and the rest of the leadership team has cut out for us. That's basically to look at the programs, to be able to evaluate, to be able to determine the programs that are most educationally sound for our students, and to certainly look for areas to where we can contain or reduce cost. During this budget philosophy, there will be mention of really provision of resources for our students. And not to steal Mr. Gorski's thunder, but I know there will be mention of our growing enrollment. being the newest member here, I can only rely on the history and the information and the data that I have available to me. But it seems as though the enrollment over the last maybe 6 or 7 years has grown to the point where we could really almost outfit an entire new school. There's, I believe, 1,300 or 1,700 new students just over the course of 6 or 7 years. And based on that information and the information that we have going forward, that I asked the board to consider all of that information, that data, as well as looking at our workable resources and the challenges that the district faces, particularly or specifically related to student growth, in your consideration of this budget philosophy. And trust that I and Mr. Gorski and Dr. Alvich, along with the entire leadership team, will certainly take our direction from the Board of Education in how we develop our district goals and in how we proceed to construct a budget that hopefully by the time we reach the stage where the budget is presented to the public next March or April, that is agreeable to everyone on the board and in the community, and at the same time meets the needs of our students and our future students. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And if I could, I will turn it back to you, or turn it over to Mr. Gorski.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kozak.
Good evening. Thanks for your attendance at this very important meeting that kicks off the budget process for the 16-17 school year. We'd like to begin with a PowerPoint presentation and then provide additional details along with it. And I think you will notice a common theme developing throughout this presentation, and that is why the district spends in the manners that we have, why the budgets have grown in the manners that they have, the cause and effect from the community and the student growth that we've experienced and are projected to continue to experience, and how that affects the budget. This philosophy presentation has been prepared through the collaboration of Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvich, myself, outreach to the principals, vice principals, supervisors, directors, teachers, as many stakeholders as we could find in this process, as well as numerous board members. We would like to recognize the very integral contributions to this process by our members, especially Mr. Doug Poy, our board president, Mr. Tom Nostein, board vice president, Michelle Arminio, Marvin Braverman, Jill DeMayo, Lou Kaufman, Kathy Kolopanowicz, who is the finance chair committee person, Anthony Precioso, Steve Ryback, and Rob Zarnewski. Through an opinion with our counselor, many of the items throughout this budget are interwoven with the 4 items that Jamesburg is allowed to vote on per statute. So Jamesburg, according to the legal advice that was rendered, does have a right to vote on this budget. Budget philosophy, excuse me. What is a budget philosophy? The philosophy establishing the annual school budget should entail the creation of a framework for a budget that supports a democratic plan of appropriate funding for the implementation of educational programs so that students may develop and learn from quality experiences based on educationally sound and fiscally prudent planning. A solid financial base is paramount to assuring that the school district will be able to meet the responsibility of preparing our students for an increasingly competitive environment. And the budget philosophy stage should be macro-focused rather than micro-focused, as much more refinement will be required and implemented in the future through the rigorous budget process. What you're going to see before you today is a very rough, first blush look into what we have solicited from our principals, vice principals, directors, and supervisors, understanding the new needs and mandates upon us for next year. What drives a budget? What is the DNA of any budget? It is student enrollment. And this graph shows district increases enrollment over the past 7 years. In 2009, 2010, beg your pardon, 2009, 2010, we had 5,500 students. We are, right now, we have in excess of 6,600 students. The projection was for 6,628 at the end of the year. I believe we're right at or past that now. And the projection for next year's budget, 16-17, which we're here to work on today, is 6,852. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a large district by student numbers, and that is an incredible rate of growth. 1,300 students over the past 7 years. That is 2 large elementary schools at capacity of additional students that we've had to educate over the past 7 years. Here's a chart comparing the 15-16 by grade makeup of enrollment to 16-17. We are projecting 224 new students for next year. Now, the average student cost, which I base upon a certification of tuition costs from the state of New Jersey, is approximately $15,000. These tuition rates vary by grade level. Preschool is about $10,000, high school is about $16,000, and some of the special ed categories, learning disabled, multiple disabled, autism, range from $21,000 to $55,000. And it's not uncommon for an individual special education placement to cost in excess of $100,000 a year. So that is a very conservative number at $15,000. 20% of our students have some classification requiring additional resources, additional monies beyond the mainstream. On a conservative average, this new student growth for 16-17 will impact the budget by about $3.4 million. That number is not included in our forthcoming appropriation list. It is just for accent for this discussion. Now we're going to begin with the specific appropriations that have come through the presentation from the principals, supervisors, directors, VPs. Transportation, and folks, again, I'm going to repeat myself. These are first blush request lists from the schools. We have a very rigorous budget defense round where every one of these items is going to be compared with board goals, district goals, and of course, to make sure that it fits within the very constrictive state cap model, which was designed to limit taxes and limit spending by districts. It is not a large afford by the state at all. For transportation, it has been recommended that we have 3 additional 54-passenger buses with cameras and radios, $297,000. 3 25-passenger vans with cameras, $190,000. 2 additional contracted drivers, $78,000. Total mandated and recommended transportation costs, $564,000. 2 of the 54-passenger buses are required to be retired by state mandate. At 15 years, we have to get them off the road. The other ones that you see there, the third one and the vans, are in their latter years, not requiring replacement yet. But when you get a 54-passenger bus and it's on the road according to our tiered schedule, which means it's running all day long, basically all year long, they experience wear and particularly rust. And we have a problem with a few of our buses that the rust is making them unsafe, and the financial commitment to make them safe is not worth it. Please hold all the questions. Let's get through it. I think you'll get a general theme, and then I'll be more than happy to entertain everything at the end. Capital improvements. First, you recall that terrible winter we had a couple years ago that caused the collapse of the Pork Store Mall, which is near our Woodland School. That also battered the Woodland School roof beyond the structural engineer's rating, which occurred before that winter, which was that it is safe and can continue on in its life. This was in the budget last year, and it was deferred because of the tight cap. It could not fit. And as a matter of priorities, the $2 million that we interjected in last year's budget to address the middle school growth by creating 11 additional classrooms within the school was more of a priority, and the structural engineer said this roof can make it, but it needs replacement soon. So that is a recommended budget priority for next year, $1,078,000. According to Mr. Tague, who is an invaluable asset in our facilities department, the Mill Lake roof needs some metal work in order to stop water leakage and prevent future problems, which just exacerbate when you ignore a roof issue. $54,000. We need some new facility vehicles, including 2 pickup trucks, which cost about $100,000 total. They're a 1998 and a 2004 model with incredible miles, and these vehicles are used rigorously. And an item on here that's new is a bus scraper depot. Right now, I would like to give you a little image of what our bus cleaning service is like at the dawn hours of a snow event here in the district. All 65 vehicles have to be cleaned. That requires overtime for all of the transportation and facility staff members to come in, to open up folding ladders on top of ice and snow in the near darkness with brooms to clean the buses. That has led to accidents, workers' compensation claims, increase in insurance. This bus scraper unit would allow a bus to drive under this device for $36,550 and clear the snow. Now, as always, we're looking for folks to share in this cost. So we're reaching out to the municipality and other school districts in the area so that they could use this and share the cost. Now let's talk about salaries and benefits. We're a very labor-intensive organization. Over 80% of the budget is salary and benefits. We have 4 bargaining units here in the district: MTEA, Teamsters, Principal Supervisors, Central Office Support Staff Association. They are all in contract now. The Board of Education has worked very diligently and cost-effectively through these negotiations. And the weighted average salary component of those negotiations is a 2.6% increase next year on $65 million of approximate salaries. That's an addition to next year's budget of about $1.7 million. That was not the only item that came out of negotiations, the 2.6%. There were givebacks and concessions that I'll talk to in a moment. From a benefits standpoint, the 15-16 budget for insurance premiums was $20,471,953. Through very intense negotiations with our broker and myself, we have had an elimination of the A4 surcharge that Mrs. Kolopanowicz mentioned once before as Finance Committee Chair. That saves almost $500,000 of insurance premiums. That was the latest cherry to come out of negotiations with Horizon. Takes premiums down to just about $20 million. Through the fruit of negotiations, all employees of this district are locked into Tier 4, Chapter 78 contributions, which is the maximum level of contribution. There are 13 districts that I'm aware of through the state that have negotiated back on these mandatory contributions toward health insurance. That would be fiscally impossible for us to consider with the very tight cap we have. Employees are paying over $3 million to reduce premiums, up to 35% of their benefit cost in many cases. That takes net premiums down to about $17 million. Our broker anticipates an increase next year of 8%. That's $1,356,000. That 8% will probably be negotiated lower because we have a special interest in doing so. However, the state health benefits plan, which was the state's solution to health insurance cost increases, is expecting increases in the 12 to 13 range again. So we're significantly lower and we do a better job. And our staff bears a lot of the pain here, and I emphasize that because we have staff members in this district, in the majority, who have not seen a net increase in their compensation over the last 4 or 5 years. And I said a net basis because of all the contributions, the additional ones for health, the additional ones for pension. Curriculum appropriations. Dory, would you like to run through these generally?
So I worked very closely with the supervisors this past year, and each supervisor has a 5-year plan for their curriculum and to revise and update their curriculum as we go through. So many of these items have come out of those discussions that I've had with supervisors and with principals. Many of these things have also been deferred from previous budgets because of the cap. So these are all items that we are in need of, understanding that we will go through the budget defense rounds, as Mr. Gorski said, and make sure that we are really looking closely at what we have and what we need and what the priorities are. So one of the needs that we have had in the district over the last few years is technology. We've done Mr. Washington has done a fantastic job of getting the technology that we need for our testing and to make sure that our students are prepared with the technology instruction that they have in their classrooms. However, one area that we really haven't focused on is the pre-K to 2 area, and that's where the pre-K to 2 administration is kind of looking for some newer technology for the elementary schools. One of the things that Mr. Washington and I are looking at this year are several different pilots throughout the district using the technology budget, one of them being Chromebooks and using them in a lower level classrooms to see if those are appropriate and how we can use them. But that's one of the needs that we're seeing in the district. We do have some needs for some facilities and equipment that we're using in our schools, one of them being the industrial arts equipment maintenance. We have many industrial art classes both at the middle school and high school, and all of that equipment needs to be updated and maintained. And that is a safety and security issue for our students also. As we're allowing them to use these devices and these tools in the classroom, we want to make sure that they're safe. Several needs for some of the sports bleachers for baseball in the cage turf fields. We have many more students involved in sports, many more parents and community members come out to watch the sports, so we need the space there. And the tennis courts need to be refurbished. But again, that's another thing that we're looking at for shared services to try and help that cost there.
Just to elaborate on the tennis courts, we received an offer from the township because so many community members enjoy playing on the tennis courts, for a contribution from potentially open space money that may be available for tennis court refurbishment. These courts go back to 1979. The cost is $305,000, of which all or part may be picked up by the township. And that's another example of all the collaboration that we've had through the mayor's office and working particularly with Wayne Hamilton.
And then our PAC is used a lot through the community and through our schools, the middle school PAC. So there are some needs there for some updates and some maintenance. Some of the clubs is increasing our careers awareness and our careers education at the middle school. So that would be one of the new programs. Also looking at our curriculum and our textbooks and what our needs are. Again, each supervisor has a 5-year plan. Some of those things have already been deferred to the point where we have some textbooks that we are currently using in our district that we can no longer get replacements for because they are no longer in print. So looking at options of where we can move for that. So that's where you're seeing some of those come in. Also looking at health, we haven't updated health. Math was another one that we were looking at, elementary math. Over the past 2 years, we have been looking at, we have improved the math series at the middle school because we've made it more Common Core aligned with the connected math. We need to continue to do that the same at the elementary school. Our curriculum is Common Core aligned, but the books, the resources that they are using right now are not. So we do a lot of work with curriculum to make sure that we're meeting the Common Core. And then, as Mr. Gorski pointed out, with the increase of student enrollment, there is an increase in need for staffing. So that is this page and looking at staffing. Specifically at the middle school and high school due to increased enrollment. Also looking at one of our initiatives is the STEM initiative, the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math initiative that we're pushing forward with throughout the district, possibly getting a STEM instructor there to help with some of our project-based learning that would go along with that initiative, and some additional technology staff to help with all of the technology standards that we are using in our district.
Also related to the impact from growth from over the years and from the fruit of the ad hoc committee for facilities and growth, there were two recommendations from that ad hoc committee. One was for redistricting, which we have in place through the efforts of Dr. Alvick, Dr. Kozak, and many. That's ready for this September, we believe. And the next one is to begin planning for a referendum. More information will be coming from the board president on that initiative, but as part of planning for a referendum, it is recommended to earmark in the budget some appropriations for the various professionals that we're going to have to reach out to as part of this process, including architect, demographer, financial advisor, bond counselor, engineer, and auditor. The anticipated cost for that is $100,000. Many costs as related to a bond referendum can be deferred until the project is approved. Some cannot. So let's take a look at a summary of the total appropriation increases. Transportation, construction and facilities, salary, benefits, both of which are contracted and mandatory. Transportations, many of them are mandated from the state. Curriculum, which is mainly based upon growth. Pre-referendum costs, which is based on growth. $7 million approximately of additional appropriations are in our view right now. And I'm going to say again, this is raw, unrefined information and has to go through the budget defense round because quite honestly, we could not fit that amount anywhere in the cap. Let's talk about budget resource considerations for next year. The bond referendum to construct this school is closed. There are no remaining funds to transfer against the debt service fund tax levy like we did last year and the previous years over a series of installments of $8 million of surplus from building the school efficiently. All of that $8 million has been returned to taxpayers for monies that otherwise would have had been raised in the debt service fund to pay the mortgage payments here. General fund state aid has been flat for the last 2 years, and we expect the same level of funding next year. I could say, as an administration, we've done everything humanly possible to increase the amount of general fund state aid, including writing our own in-house legislation, which is still alive and before the Senate and Assembly, but it's a long shot because of the nature of politics. So what can we do on our own? Well, let's talk about proprietary funds. We had a lease agreement to open up our facilities to the before and after school care network. They paid us $100,000 a year. That lease was not renewed due to an initiative to take that in-house and to recognize revenues of about $300,000 as a revenue source and to run our own program called Falcon Care. A great deal of work and investment has gone into that program, and that is also set to open this September. Another proprietary fund that we're working on is summer camp academies. This was the recommendation of Mr. Ryback, one of our board members, and we are in the design stage through many efforts of Dr. Alvick to come up with summer camp academies, and these are anticipated to contribute to revenues in future years. Both Falcon Care and summer camp academies are separate proprietary funds from the general fund budget, and the board's philosophy has been, number one, once the MECA loan is paid off, that retained earnings that remains in these funds could be used for tax relief or to supplant otherwise monies that you would have to raise through the general fund budget, which is permissible. And finally, the Jamesburg Agreement is the fruit of many hours of the previous board, and that agreement affords that this year Jamesburg will budget for an appropriate number of students coming to Monroe at a tuition rate defined by the state's budget program. Let's talk about the last remaining revenue source of materiality, and that's the cap. And I would like to emphasize that when you are projecting what the cap will grow to next year, it is a projection, it is an estimate, and subject to change. The formula begins with the last year, prior year tax levy from the general fund, the $92,308,000. You receive an automatic adjustment from the budget software for an enrollment addition to levy. That's calculated based on trend line analysis from the state. We cannot have access to that and cannot predict what that number is. But we'll use something similar to last year, $663,000, which is a fraction of the $3.4 million of cost that I identified before. That comes up with your base. Then it's adjusted and increased by 2% to $94,831,000. Then there's another optional adjustment for health care costs that the district is eligible for. Again, that's an estimate. Last year it was in the range of $250,000, and that's compared to how well you're doing compared to the state health benefits plan, and you get an adjustment for that. And that's all based upon the state's ever-changing budget guidelines. So our cap can grow in the general fund to only $95,081,077. Compared to last year, that's an increase of $2,772,432. That is a very conservative amount of growth for a district this size with what you're anticipating for capital needs, new student needs, and mandates from the state, and special ed spending. So your appropriations total $6,961,000, and your revenues can grow approximately $2.7 million. Appropriations in excess of revenues are projected right now at $4.2 million. This will require programs and services to be reviewed to maximize efficiencies in order to even balance the budget. I can't underemphasize the amount of work that goes into the budget process, the budget defense rounds, the evaluation of existing programs as well as those requested for next year to meet the needs of students with the resources we have. Let's talk about taxes next. Ratables are the most significant variable in determining the tax rate. Preliminary reports are that ratable growth will be slightly higher than the preceding year, 15-16, which increased by over 2%. This will very favorably impact rates for 16-17. That is very good news. The more people who share in the tax levy, the lower everybody's rate. How does Monroe compare for taxes with all the other communities in the county? We had a reevaluation. There's a lot of pain being expressed. A lot of people are getting a reevaluation up to numbers that they probably should have been valued at over the last 15, 20 years. So of course there's an inherent adjustment with that. But Monroe, and this comes directly from the state's website, this is an average property tax assessment that includes municipal and school. Monroe is $6,702, which was actually a decrease from 2013 of 1.8%. And what I want you to understand from this is that Monroe is in the bottom 20 percentile for average property taxation in the county. Many of the districts that are even below us receive an incredible amount of state aid, which offsets the tax levy. With the immaterial amount of state aid that we receive, we are still in the bottom 20%. South Brunswick, for example, is over $20 million of aid type that we don't have. And New Brunswick, I'd have to get my calculator. So let's talk about our accomplishments that we achieved with the use of those critical tax dollars. Doctor?
Okay, so since I wasn't able to be here for the budget meeting because I was sick, I'm happy that I'm able to present the slide again. about our accomplishments and what we've done. So I did update the information for you from the budget presentation last year, because we have our graduation rate for the students that just graduated in June. We were up to 98.5% of our students this year who graduated, which is a great thing for all of our high school staff. Absolutely. Our June 2015 graduates, 86% of them will attend either a 2 or a 4-year college. So again, that's an increase from the rate last year. We do have 3% attending career and technical schools, 2% entered the military, 5% are entering the workforce, and 4% are undecided or non-grads. We are continuing to enroll our students this year. They're finalizing the schedules at the high school, but we are almost over 700 students this year who will be enrolled in our AP courses. And our average scores on the SAT and the ACT are, again, higher than average. They actually increased this year even more so than last year. Remember, for all of our AP courses, all of our students are required to take the AP assessment, and they must score a 3 or better. And we have a higher average than the state for our students who are scoring 3 or better on that exam. And that's where some of our awards have come in. The top, the best high schools, the U.S. News and World Report, we received the silver medal in 2014 because of the number of students who have scored so well on our AP exams. And we were recognized there. The top 10 transformative schools, in 2014, this was the first year that this award was offered, and we were one of those school districts that received this award. It basically looked at how we are utilizing technology and being innovative in our practices in the school. And we were one of the first schools to receive that award. And we are still a part of Innovate New Jersey, which is a state Department of Education initiative, and we continue to work with them. It puts districts together who are working in innovative ways with technology, some of our blended learning, flipped classroom practices that we're doing in our classroom, the iPads, and one-to-one at the high school, but it includes more than that, and all of the instructional practices we're doing in our classroom. And we continue to be a part of that, but we were one of the inaugural districts that were accepted into that program. So we are still doing all of those things, and as I said, at the high school, the numbers did increase this year for their graduation rate.
High performance, as Dr. Alvick just outlined, and numerous best practices. Mr. Ventrilo and I received an incredible amount of accolades at last year's county roundtable budget meeting, when we and our colleagues met for a county review of our budgets for efficiency. There are so many best practices going on here with regard to health insurance and on, that the meeting actually stopped and we got wows from our colleagues. High performance plus numerous best practices and relatively low taxation, which is again in the bottom 20th percentile of total average property taxes in the county, equals incredible value for the resources raised to educate children. Therefore, it is Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvick, and my recommendation as the Business Administrator Board Secretary to develop a budget to stay within the very constrictive state budget cap while prioritizing the following subjects the following areas subject to cap restrictions. Number 1, construction projects that we discussed. Number 2, curriculum projects that have a lot of refinement to do with the budget defense rounds. Number 3, salary increases as per the contracts, benefit increases, and transportation increases. I'd like to thank everybody and the board members who contributed all along through this process. I would like to just highlight a couple other areas that are noteworthy that I didn't have time to incorporate into another slide. I mentioned this before, but it's worth saying again. For the last 3 budget years, 15-16, 14-15, 13-14, I went through the very large budget book and I pulled out all appropriations that had to do with growth. Additional sections, additional classrooms, additional teachers, construction related to growth. And when I added up the budget amounts for the last 3 years, and I subtracted all of the new appropriations that are very specifically attributed to growth, there would have been no aggregate tax increases for the last 3 years had it not been for the effect of growth on this district. So, how do we run the district? How do we create efficiency here? Well, through the efforts and initiatives of the previous finance committees and building grounds transportation committees and policy committee meetings and curriculum committee meetings and administrative meetings and defense round meetings, we have, and this board deserves a lot of credit for the following budget efficiencies that I'll go through briefly. Number one, an opt-out of insurance was initiated, which led to an agreement 2 negotiations ago. That has saved over $4.3 million with over 160 staff saying, I don't need insurance, my spouse has suitable elsewhere. And that reduces appropriations. The traditional plan, which is the most expensive Cadillac health plan that we have, is frozen and will be eliminated at the end of the current MTEA agreement. Chapter 78 negotiations are locked in place at Tier 4 for the whole duration of the new MTEA contract. We've refunded the 2002, the 2003, the 2006, and the 2008 series bonds, saving well in excess of $10 million of interest cost over the next 20 years. We've engaged in purchasing consortiums for district supplies that has saved over $1.5 million in the last 3 years, as evidenced by a letter from the purchasing consortium group through Middlesex Regional Ed Service Commission. We saved about $439,000 on Brookside's roof by changing it from metal to asphalt with a longer useful life. That came out of a lot of effort at building grounds transportation. We have returned to taxpayers $8.3 million of excess high school bond surplus against the debt service tax relief. The MTEA has come forth and agreed to sidebars for 2 less expensive health care plans, the Direct Access Plan and the EPO, for members to join, reducing combined health care costs. We've had numerous RFPs for banking, Jamesburg Agreement. Insurance has saved over $7 million over the last 3 years by changing brokers, by changing the type of payment methods that we have, by opt-outs, and by concessions. For the first time in 17 years, the 14-15 school budget produced a school tax decrease of $114 on an average assessed home at $300,709 when compared with the preceding year. The Monroe Township Board of Education achieved mutually agreeable, favorable settlements with the Monroe Township Education Association, the Support Staff Association, the Teamsters, and the Principal Supervisors Association, leaving net budget impacts of 2% for the MTEA, 2% for the Education Support Staff Association, 1.66% for the Teamsters, and 2% for the Principal Supervisors. And net, I mean salary increases minus the material concessions that were negotiated as part of the group and are an integral consideration. You can't just look at the percentage increase. Taxpayer Guide to Educational Spending just came out, and if you look at there, and I would encourage everyone to do so, take a look at Monroe's teaching salaries and benefits compared to the county and administrative salaries and benefits. It is extraordinarily low. I mentioned before the agreement with Jamesburg School District. Within the very constrictive tax levy cap, we have on installments worked on at least 4 roofs and renovations to schools, making room for growth. The district has eliminated all portable classroom trailer items from the conclusion of the 14-15 school year. At the peak, 89 portable classroom units were rented and deployed through the district, and their elimination saves at least $1.5 million per year in rental payments. And the board's initiative into new proprietary funds is expected to generate revenues that will have an effect by reducing otherwise needed general fund levies in the future once they get off the ground. And the creative thinking of this board and the creative implementation of policy that was created by this board will continue to make this district more efficient in the future. Monroe is a very efficiently run district. We value every taxpayer dollar that is raised and used it appropriately. Of course, there's a line item in any budget that you could find that any individual can disagree with. But if you look at the aggregate large numbers here, we are doing very well. And that concludes my presentation. And Mr. Poi, would you like to open it up for questions?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Gorski, for that very thorough presentation, keeping in mind that all of this is quite fluid in terms of any specifics that might be mentioned here. So I'll now open the floor to questions from members of the board. Mr. Ryback?
I have just two questions. Mike, one for you, Dory, one for you. I'm sorry. Michael, with the increase in transportation, although I have a feeling I know the answer is probably going to be negligible, if anything, could we expect an increase in categorical aid?
I very much appreciate that question. Categorical aid includes an aid type for transportation efficiency. Monroe's transportation department is the most efficient in the county and among the most efficient in the state. We run 4 tiers throughout the day, so that means that a $100,000 bus that's on the road is being utilized all day long. It's not delivering 6 kids and then sitting in the yard all day. That efficiency rating makes Monroe eligible for millions of dollars of transportation categorical aid. However, the state of New Jersey's budget formula reduces that amount, number one, by amounts that the district is over adequacy, so that has a reducing effect on the amount of aid that you're actually awarded through, even though you're entitled to it. And number two, because of the state's hardship in raising revenues, they defer your award over a 5-year time period, so you only get 20% per year. Now, the state's problems that they've had in the last few years, they don't even look at the calculations anymore. They're holding districts harmless, which means you're frozen basically at the amounts you received last year, which is very hazardous for Monroe because of the increasing students and demands that we have upon us, and the increased special education classifications and all that we are responsible for.
Thank you. Dory, this had come up previously, so when you were talking about AP courses, I just thought of it. What percentage of students that take AP courses take the exam?
100. All of the students, unless a student is absent during that time. Every student every student that takes an AP class takes the AP exam.
Do we pay for the test or the parents?
We have in the past. That was one of the things that we had decided to cut from the budget.
Thank you.
Ms. Arminio?
From this budget, the AP testing is being cut, or a future budget?
The 15-16 budget.
15-16.
15-16 budget,
Current
it
year.
was cut.
Current year, okay, thank you.
Mr. Kaufman?
The $663,000 that we get from the state for the adjusted growth, you mentioned before that, it's kind of like a number that you get, right? With everything that has to do with the state, it's magic numbers. They kind of make it up as they go. Do we have any way to determine if that $663,000 is accurate?
It is not accurate. When my first year as the business administrator, the first thing I engaged in the budget process was to try to untangle that calculation and see how much we're actually getting and if it merits our efficiency, what we should be entitled to. And it does not. The state has their own cohort survival methods for enrollment. And they provide their own trend line calculation on those enrollments, and then they align those enrollment increases to suit the eligibility of funds for distribution. Okay, so it's impossible to calculate. It's approximately that number, but again, 600,000 compared to 3.4 million, which is actually what those new students are costing, does not even allow your budget to grow enough to accommodate the new students, which means you're going to have to inevitably do belt tightening on your own and eliminate some programs and services or create efficiencies in order to balance.
Mrs. Arminio?
I just need further clarification on the page, total additional appropriation considerations.
Total appropriation considerations are $6,961,044.
Right. I guess I just would like clarification, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me. You said at this number, we would be well beyond the 2% cap, is that correct?
Absolutely, that is correct. When we project our cap overall for next year, we are projected to be in excess by $4.2 million. That is going to be reduced through the budget defense rounds by eliminating some of these new requested items, by creating efficiencies, by going to battle with health insurance carriers and looking for competitive quotes, AmeriHealth versus Horizon, et cetera. And by eliminating some programs and services that the district currently engaged in that are not necessarily in line with board and district goals or are determined to be of a lesser value.
Okay, so again, if everything were equal and we had a windfall of funds, this would be what everybody is asking for at the time, a
Yes,
consideration.
That is the first blush, unrefined wish list, which everybody has intelligently comprised based upon the new enrollment needs, the new state mandates, and the new facility requirements for next year.
And I think you did mention this, and forgive me if you have to go find this. Given the new enrollment, our cost based on the new enrollment is what out of this number?
About $3.4 million, which is not included in there specifically. That was just an accent for discussion purposes, just to let you know what the average new student costs. There is no number for new students times that 15,000 that's included in this new appropriation list.
Okay.
This new appropriation list is specific to items that are requested
Or as
for
is
next year.
now?
Yes.
So we are anticipating a cost of potentially, I'm trying to, 3 million if we get another 224 students, or is that the projection?
Yes. On average, 224 students cost $3.4 million.
And
Our appropriation projections for next year are that for specific items, we will need about $7 million of new appropriations. When you subtract that from what the cap will afford you at only $2.8 million, you're left with $4.2 million of appropriations in excess of revenues, which is going to require a lot of refinement and review of programs and services.
appropriation in excess of revenue.
Yes.
And do we know we do know now what our revenue will be? Well, for the 2015, we know what our revenue is.
Well, we hope we know.
From taxes.
The state has cut state aid mid-year, so we know what the award was, but we haven't recognized it yet.
Well, you know, at this point, I mean, I think we really have to not consider state aid at all, almost, because for 15 years, I mean, it's not just the last few years, for 15 years, we've been talking about, you know, what we're put through not having state aid, so we might as well not even have that discussion. If it comes, it would be almost like, it would be hardly a gift, but it would be, you know, something to have to spend. But so really the bottom line is, and my concern with all this is that there's this money, there's the potential for a lot more students that we haven't budgeted for. Where are we going to get that? Like in mid-year, let's say we get 200 students. You're shaking your head. I mean, can you explain that? We
You know-
can't
you know what-
automatically.
You know
increase
what,
the
along
tax.
that theme, the Oak Tree principal, Patty Dinsmore, is here. And Oak Tree is one of the schools that is most affected by growth. That's the area of town that's really
Right.
booming. Patty, would you mind coming up and talking a little bit about our previous conversation about how your actual numbers are exceeding even the demographic projection? And how at this stage of the summer, we've experienced a shocking number of new registrations?
Talk off my head here,
That's
but
fine.
when I started 4 years ago, we had 575. Last year, I ended with 740. With the redistricting, I was supposed to start at 515. I'm already up to 590. And just talking to central registration, they have 20 folders, appointments every day. I anticipate I'll be over 600 by September 1st.
That's after the redistricting.
Yeah, so let's bring it to, we're getting, most of these are, I think, safe to say, from new construction,
Yes,
that we have no control over how.
I would
the-
say
the density-
99%.
Right, so the density of the new construction has caused us to have this blossoming of enrollment. Is it calculated, the first year of taxes on a new home, does that come to us that year? Do we get the tax revenue? In other words, are people contributing, they're giving us their lovely children, are new construction properties contributing to the tax levy?
In the immediate first year, my understanding is no. It takes for a reevaluation cycle of the ratables.
So we are absorbing the cost before the benefit of any tax revenue.
In the initial year, yes.
That's a lot, though. If you're saying that 200 and some odd kids a year are coming, and it's approximately a $3 million cost, and there isn't even anything that's being put in for that cost, if we have to raise taxes, we're raising taxes on other people, other shareholders. Wow, okay, so we have a lot to consider when it comes to that cost, I mean. Because the only place it looks like you're saying we're gonna get funds is from the tax levy, if nothing else is coming through.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we need more shared services. Because there is some kind, and there's builders put in some kind of money or something like that, that doesn't get in even to the municipal budget. It's not calculated in the municipal budget, but it's collected in the municipal budget. Correct?
I will say this, we engage in numerous shared services that are all defined in our budget, which is posted on our website. We have a very aggressive shared service outreach, and many of them are with the municipality. We are at the early stages now of a very material grant from the township in terms of land consideration for a future referendum. I don't want to discuss that yet, as I don't want to steal Mr. Poy's thunder for the ad hoc discussion, but it's a sensitive area right now. It's in its infancy, and we're working on a lot of shared services with the township. We have very positive indications, both regarding the tennis courts and also a contribution of land similar to Oak Tree School's contribution of land, which was valued at $3 million to open that school, which otherwise would have had to have been raised from the taxpayers through referendum.
Other questions or comments? Prezioso?
Yes, we recently had a discussion about the iPads and the problems that it was having for me with the amount of money that was being poured into the iPads. I remember asking Dr. Alvich if we were going to have this go down to the middle school and the elementary schools, and the answer was no to a point to the middle school. Now, I see over here in the technology and appropriation considerations, you're thinking about hiring 2 tech staff and exposing our children to Chromebooks. that what you're saying?
Possibly Chromebooks. That's one of the new technology pieces we're looking at, yes. But it wouldn't be a one-to-one where the students would take it home. These are just the technology that we would need in the schools.
I understand that, but this word here, sitting at circle time, I have 2 children in the schools, I know what circle time is, and I think that these kids don't need technology, they need teachers to teach them and to imprint what we believe in, not what the, let me finish, not what they're going to see from their Chromebooks or the internet. And I also see that we're growing in leaps and bounds in this technology department. We're having a hard time getting money together, and we're talking about expanding. We're hiring 2 new staff members, supposedly, when we could be taking that money from the staff and building 2 new classrooms that we need so desperately. So I don't understand why. We don't even have a pilot program. That was one of the big mistakes we made when we first got the iPads. Now we're looking to expand down to our little children, and without any pilot program to see how it affects them, or if it helps even our kids that have it.
This wouldn't be one-to-one for the students. This would be just technology for the teachers to utilize in their classrooms.
This is the first step.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be an iPad. It could be anything. That's why I said Mr. Washington and I are very involved with looking at multiple platforms right now and looking at all of the different types of technology that are out there. But this would not be for the students to have in their hands. This is for the teachers to use as an instructional device in their classrooms.
I understand. This is the first step. You're hiring new 2 tech staff.
That's a separate piece from that other one.
But still expanding the program.
Well, the technology resource personnel would be more to help the teachers to use the technology in their classrooms more effectively. And it would be, so they would be the staff. We used to have technology personnel in each of our schools. It was cut out of the budget several years ago. With all of the new technology that we're getting in the classrooms, it's part of our PD program to train all of our teachers in the technology. So that's what the role of those technology teachers would be. Right now, we have one. We have one for the entire district. We have, it was Karen O'Connell's position.
I'm sorry, if I may, keep in mind that, as was mentioned earlier, this is somewhat of a wish list. And to dwell on the specifics at this point probably is counterproductive. I certainly don't want to stymie any discussion or questions. But keep in mind as well that anything regarding curriculum must go through the curriculum committee and then get the full approval of the board, or the approval of the full board. Anything dealing with other matters that are in here will either go, before building and grounds. It all depends upon what the particular item is. So it's not as if we're approving anything in particular at this point. And I know Dr. Kozak wants to make a comment, but I just want to make an observation and see if I'm correct here, Mr. Gorski. When I was looking at the budget appropriations, and I suppose it would be, just for the purpose of everyone else, it's the 3rd page of budget appropriations where it talks about salaries and benefits. And that figure comes out to be, well, you can see it, $1,356,000 or $357,000. Now, my understanding is, because this is based on the negotiated contracts and based on benefits, that this is somewhat of a fixed figure. This is a definite cost, correct?
That is absolutely correct. This is a contracted obligation that is present for next year and is non-negotiable. And the total between salaries and benefits, which is non-negotiable for next year, as you could see, is about $3 million of the total of 7 new appropriations for next year. Plus, there's a lot of mandates from the state and capital improvements that are really a very high priority right now. And again, if I could, I'm sorry, if I could just, you can never shut me up. If I could refocus, the attention, there's going to be a lot of need for contributions like Mr. Prezioso's during the budget refinement process at the committee level and so on. For today, if I could refocus the attention back on the philosophy development at the macro level, I believe we've demonstrated that we have approximately $7 million of new appropriation needs upon us. As Mr. Poy, you said, most of which are contracted now or mandated by the state, and revenue growth only allows for 2.7, leaving a shortfall of about 4.2. When you think about that for a moment, and you're trying to develop a philosophy, and you're trying to consider student needs and the effect on taxes, you feel a little bit helpless, at least I did putting this together, that we are so overwhelmed with new needs, and our revenues coming from the state are fixed and finite, while our revenues from the taxpayers that are going into CAP are also so constricted, that $4.2 million is again going to have to be eliminated through the refinement process to the budget or the elimination of existing programs and services. Our work is cut out for us in the next few months as an administration and a board level, just to get this to CAP, even by the development of a hopefully anticipated philosophy of going to CAP today.
Thank you, Mr. Gorski, and I will now continue with the observation that I wanted to make. I'm also looking under transportation, where it appears that we're mandated, which means required, to replace 2 passenger buses. Now, looking at the figures here, that's about $200,000. So if I take that $200,000 and add it to the salaries and benefits, I get over $1,500,000. Okay? I then look at what we're allowed to grow the cap to, and I see that $1,500,000 is more than half of what we're allowed to grow the cap to. So, I mean, it's obvious to me that even though we have a tremendous wish list here, there's an awful lot of stuff, and I'm talking about curriculum, I'm talking about building repairs. There's just a lot of stuff that we're not going to be able to accommodate. No way. I mean, there's just no way that we're going to be able to do it. And that's not even taking into account the cost of the additional students. Just taking into account what we're required to pay in salary and benefits to the staff, the 2 buses that we are required to replace. I mean, those were costs that we don't have any flexibility on, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, so if we have no flexibility on that, then out of the $2,772,000 that we're allowed to increase the budget by, more than 50% of it is already eaten up. You know, I just want to make everyone aware of that. That really there's only about $1,200,000 left to try to accommodate all these other needs. It is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Yeah, everyone's bringing up such great points, and being on the board for a while, you see these trends over many, many, many years. The other thing to keep in mind too is, even though we have this incredible growth, disproportionate to other districts with respect to special needs children, right? And we've already demonstrated that children with special needs tend to cost a little bit more than children without special needs. So when you factor in everything you just mentioned, and the fact that, when I first started on the board, I think the percentage was close to maybe 13 or 14% of our kids had special needs. And Mike, I think you said we're closer to 20% where we are today. That number just by itself could represent another chunk of that dollar that we have no control over, because we happen to be a great district. We happen to have a lot of the special education stuff that we do is top of the shelf, and people are coming here because it's highly recognized. And folks come in here. We bring a lot of these activities in-house where we can, but some things we can't do, and we have to send out to other facilities. And again, adding to that cost burden of stuff that we can't control. So, we're kind of almost a victim of our own success, if you will. But these are things that have been happening since I've been here, and it's been probably longer than it should be, but all these years that we've been here, that it's just an incredible growth of cost. So that's another thing that also comes into play when you're thinking about things we have to have, or nice to have, versus things we don't need.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Anyone else? Mr. Prezioso?
Michael, on property tax averages, we're minus 1.8 now, the change, and
That is correct. This information comes from the state of New Jersey, and the average property tax, which again includes municipal and school district as well, was a 1.8% decrease from the calendar year 2013 to the calendar year 2014.
so that's before the evaluation?
That was the year that was part of the reevaluation.
That's why it went down, because of the evaluations,
I
right?
wouldn't say it is definitely because that is part of the reason it went down. However, think about what a reevaluation is. I mean, you're still going to raise the same levy. You're just spreading it differently amongst the universe of people paying. Because some folks bought homes 15, 20 years ago and are still paying taxes on an assessment at that same value. It was as low as 50% when they did the reevaluation. So it was part of it, perhaps, with a fair, equitable distribution of the raising of the levy. But there was also bond referendum money to the extent of $2.5 million that was returned to reduce the debt service tax levy, and a lot of other variables in that.
Mr. Nostine?
Just a couple quick, I guess, questions or comments. I know last year we had 5.4 million in anticipated growth, if you will, not growth, I guess, or expenditures based on at the budget philosophy meeting. We opted to go to cap at that point, and obviously the cap last year was less than this year, the growth. What happens a lot, I see, is that, at least from my constituents, I get the questions of, we have a 2% cap. Why did my tax rate go up 7.67%? Why did the budget grow 3.88% last year? I get that, but what I'm trying to understand is, let's say we went to cap. Is there any way for you to anticipate what the tax rate growth estimate would be?
The answer to that directly is no. At this vantage point, we don't know what the ratables are going to be for 16-17. The ratables are the population sharing the levy. There's two components to this. There's the taxpayers sharing the levy and the levy itself. And without knowing the aggregate property values from the taxpayers, which is called the ratables, we cannot calculate that formula. We know the appropriation side. We know that ratables are growing, which is very favorable. And we know that ratables are the most important variable in determining the tax rate. My first year as business administrator, ratables dropped $70 million. My second year, they dropped $75 million. You'd have to look back in over 12 years to find a drop in ratables of any magnitude near that. When you have a drop in ratables of $75 million, you have an automatic tax increase for every taxpayer of about 5 cents. That's extraordinary, and that's because there's less people paying. Everybody's individual rate goes up. So we'll be able to answer that more definitively as time goes on and we get the ratables in January late. And also, you know, if we received our fair share of state aid, that would also reduce the amount of tax levy that we would have to raise to meet our needs.
I also noticed last year that the automatic adjustment for enrollment was only 20,000. This year it's 663,000. Is there a reason for that? Even though we had less last year, but not quite that less.
Yeah. There's no doubt that our enrollment is growing incredibly higher than our colleagues. There's no doubt that the enrollment adjustment to cap should probably be in the $3.4 million capacity. But the state's calculation and their trend line study to control taxation limits that to only $660,000 for 15-16. And it was only $20,000 the year before that. It's a formula that we don't have access to, and conservatism in budget establishment is to try to base it on what you received the prior year, not to overestimate it by any means, because then you'll be left short.
I also noticed that the if I'm reading this correctly, that it looks like the enrollment adjustment, that gets inflated by 2%, but the adjustment for healthcare is just an add-on, is that accurate?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
I know you've told us in the past that give you the cake you want us to bake, and you'll bake it, and I get that. If we were to tell you we want to just go raise 2%, in other words, raise the tax levy by 2%, how difficult would it be for you to show us, or at least let us see what the budget looks like at that point?
That would be very difficult because you're taking the tax calculation, which is at the tail end of this process, and the tail now is driving the rest of the dog, and the dog being the appropriation development to meet student needs. In that instance, student needs and the requirements of the district would be ignored for the priority of determining a tax rate first. I can tell you that every emphasis is placed upon lowering that tax rate, and nothing tickles administrative's fancy more so than say the school tax levy is decreasing like it did 2 years ago. And we are on the same page with the taxpayers and the Board of Education in that process to minimize that burden. Nobody hates taxes more than we do. But our first priority, and the first priority of the board, must be students' needs first, and that's why I would not recommend that method.
I'm not saying to look at the tax rate. I'm saying basically that's what we're doing here. We're increasing the tax levy and then working backwards, except in this case we're going 2% plus enrollment adjustment and health care. If we were to request as a board that we want to see what the budget looks like with basically the enrollment adjustment and the health care adjustments backed out, that would actually just be inflated of last year's budget by 2%. I'm not talking the tax rate, because of course we could never predict that. I'm just saying let's, instead of growing it by 2.7 million, let's grow it by 1.8 million, because that's what 2% is of last year's general fund tax levy.
That's an interesting observation. It's all along the same lines as your first question. How do we calculate this 660,000? The 660,000 is the available cap adjustment for enrollment, when the actual cost is 3.4 million. So we're already suffering a millions of dollars by lack of cap growth from only 600,000. To eliminate and abate the 600 would only exacerbate that problem and really put us up against a revenue shortfall in trying to meet the needs of the students, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ryback?
Mike, I just want to see if I have this straight, and I think if I do, then I think it's important to underscore it. You're saying that the state will cap at a certain amount, 600 and, how much was 660 something?
By going to cap, we can grow the budget $2.8 million.
Well, whatever, they will cap what they're giving us.
Yes.
And then the reason for that, as you mentioned, obviously, is that they want to not raise the state taxes. So basically what they're doing is transferring the burden to the municipality and school systems.
Mr. Ryback, I'm so delighted you brought that point up, because back in the 10-11 school year, Monroe School District lost 95% of our state aid. $4.4 million of 4.6 was taken away from Monroe. What that did was shift the state's burden to fund public education in Monroe to the tune of $4.4 million and push it into the tax levy and say, eat this, taxpayers, this one's yours. And it remains there ever since.
And they go around saying how they keep taxes down at the state level.
Yeah, but, okay.
I just want to bring that out.
Arminio?
But again, we've been paralyzed by that for many years, and while it is the burden that we have, so we have to try to make do, I think, with understanding that burden. To keep saying that it's happened, we get it. I get it that it's happened. I think it's unfortunate, and it puts us in a very great disadvantage, but it is our burden also to recognize. I'd like to go back to, and this was from before I was on the board, where was the tipping point between having increased enrollment and the cost of the pupil cost going down, and now the cost rising? Because at one point, when we had more students, we were able to accommodate it, and actually the cost was going down. I think at one point it was 14,000. I think that was about 3 or 4 years ago. And so I'm just curious as to where the tipping point was in terms of enrollment as to now, I mean, I get the increase because we've had to get more classrooms and more sections. But where was that tipping point? Because at one point we were saying we were absorbing it in a way that was very efficient and we were getting reduced cost.
I think the per pupil costs have slightly been increasing over time, probably over the last decade. An interesting statistic is on page 119 of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, where it shows the percentage change in per pupil spending. If you take the average over the last 5 years, it is below a 2% increase in per pupil spending. And I'll read you the last few years. It's 0.98% increase, a negative 0.39% increase, a 0.85% increase, a 1.05% increase, a 2.3% increase. Per pupil spending is increasing over the last 5 years less than 2%. That's probably less than inflation.
So I guess that's what we've been talking, because I know it was within the last 5 years we had those discussions about per pupil cost. Yes. But now we're seeing an enormous increase because of just, we're satiated, I guess, in terms of facilities.
When you have an enormous increase in pupils and you have a fixed and finite budget cap, it will reduce per pupil spending. And that's part of the essence of the Jamesburg Agreement. Monroe's per pupil spending is expected to continue to, slightly increase or decrease in the high school line item in particular, which if Jamesburg budgets more for as per the agreement, that arbitrage, the difference, will be applied back to the arrearage. And that's driven by Monroe's very handsome per pupil spending.
If I'm understanding that last remark, that's what I'm doing, is I want to check my understanding. The per pupil cost, and that's all encompassing if you're talking about the total per pupil cost. The total per pupil cost can decrease simply by the number of students increasing.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. That does not translate into a lower budget, however.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay, maybe that's.
I just wanted to clarify that.
That was the nature of my question.
Yeah, because even though the budget goes up, if your number of kids are increasing, the per pupil cost may be going down, even though your budget's going up, because it's having to go up to account for all that additional expense.
Mr. Boyd?
Yes.
But the cap has essentially limited how much the budget can go up.
What was your teacher hat on? That was very good.
Very good explanation. That was very good.
Any other questions or comments on this? Mr. Milstein?
Mr. Gorski, you brought up the point of the Jamesburg tuition agreement. I believe somewhere I saw in here that it was 1.67 of the total revenue, I believe, or 1.65, something like that. What exactly is that dollar amount, and how is this working out? Is this helping us with the, because I noticed the state, on one of the sites I looked at today, I believe the Jamesburg tax rate went down 5.5%. I'm just wondering, are they allocating enough money to increase the tuition spending as we had anticipated?
The percentage of Monroe's revenue from Jamesburg tuition is 1.64%. Jamesburg also pays transportation fees, which slightly raises that percentage. That is the tuition revenue component of the overall budget. It is important and it is advantageous to Monroe to have a receiving relationship with Jamesburg, because Jamesburg pays their per pupil rate times the number of students. And they also help Monroe share in a lot of the fixed cost in the district. So there is an advantage of that relationship to Monroe.
Oh, no, absolutely, but I'm just wondering, how is that agreement working out? Are we on track of what we had anticipated?
Yes, the agreement is really in its infancy stage. It's a 7-year agreement. The reason that duration was extended that long was to allow it to materialize and for the per pupil spending difference with the actual tuition cost paid by Jamesburg to work. Future reports will be given to the Finance Committee and the Board on the fruit of that agreement as it matures.
This, excuse me, that 1.64%, is that up or down from last year's budget as far as its contribution to our budget?
I would expect it to be very similar.
And is that the goal going forward, or should that number start? Actually, probably the number will probably go down as our budget goes up, is what you're saying.
I would expect that number to go down as the budget goes up, as you anticipated.
Hopefully, no president.
Yes, ma'am.
The automatic adjustment for enrollment, that estimate, you said last year we got 20,000?
Correct.
And so, was that a random act of the state saying this is all we're getting despite what you, what the calculation says?
I don't think it was random. I think it was a very creative calculation because certainly our enrollment growth is very steady every year, and it should afford our cap to grow 3.4 million, as I said before.
Right.
But it only afforded us 20 million last year, which means you got to do a lot of belt tightening in order to fit that growth. And this year it's only growing 600,000. Ultimately, it's meant to suppress the size of your budget, as is the cap. And it has done that.
Last year we got how many new students?
267 for 15-16.
And so this year, I guess I'm not understanding the 20,000 versus the 663,000. It's a huge difference, and
It is a huge difference from 20,000 to 660,000. It should be 3.4 million. So it's not affording our budget to grow consistent with the amount of student costs that are coming in.
all right, I understand that. What I don't understand is, so are they changing the formula every year?
Yes, the budget
How about they're
guidelines
doing like-
and the calculation changes every year.
And we don't know what that calculation is.
For that, we do not. I called the county office, I called the State Department my first year here. Trust me, I'm very persistent in my calls and efforts, and I got no answer. So I based it conservatively on the prior year, and that's all I've been able to do over time. But I will say it's very difficult for the district. It's very burdensome because the cost of this new students that are compounding is not meeting the growth in the cap. So existing programs and services are having to be refined in or efficiencies created to make up the difference.
Have we tried Oprahing that?
No, I haven't considered doing that, no.
Thanks.
Yeah, quick question on that, though. When you try and calculate, based on a prior year, with this incredible pendulum swing from one year to another, how are you going to do next year's? Because in the past couple of years, you had 20,000 last year, 600,000 this year. What number are you going to use next year?
It could go back to 20,000.
I know. How do you figure this out?
After you have your budget through the defense rounds and done. That's a very late calculation that comes through, very late. That's probably late February timeframe. And it's going to require hustle in an hour's number of time by administration to make cuts to make it fit. And you're going to have to very quickly and very undemocratically make cuts to programs and services. And that's without the cooperation of the principals, that's without the information. Dr. Kozak?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a tough decision, and it's a decision that a lot of districts, or all districts, face. One of the goals that we're hoping to do, to accomplish, is to prioritize as best as possible the items that would require appropriations or expenditures in the budget. And that would be somewhat of a democratic process, meaning the entire leadership team, all the administrators would have, principals, supervisors, directors, et cetera, would have input into that, with the agreement that And that the last couple days of the budget cycle, when those numbers come in, we won't have time to go back and discuss. So we'll have to have that agreement ahead of time. Should the numbers come in at 20,000, this is, these items will most likely be cut. Should it come in a little higher, well, maybe that'll be saved. Of course, that'll also be a discussion that will be held with the Board of Education prior to those numbers coming in as well, so that you're fully apprised of where we're at. And if I could just add one thing, we're not there yet, but there will be a discussion soon talking about the district and the board goals. And one of the district goals that I would like to advance might be to help address some of our rising costs, specifically in the area of special education. And I don't want to talk about it now. I'll wait till the goal portion of the meeting comes up. But listening not only to what I heard tonight, but also information that I've found through, prior to tonight, that's an area that I'm hoping we can move in to maybe help reduce or at least minimize some of the rising costs in that area.
Mr. Nostine?
Mr. Kaplan brought up a kind of the point that I was intimating before about backing out the cost of the automatic adjustment for enrollment. That is a concern because, as we mentioned, it was 20,000. So, I would like to see what the budget would look like. Last year, and I know at a couple of the finance committee meetings, we talked about what would you cut or give us what you think you could cut out of the budget. And that's why, to me, I have to admit, I think if we had a 4% cap, we'd be sitting here tonight talking 2.7 million times 2. I think that we would obviously be growing the budget to 4% because that's where it needs to go. There's nobody that can admit that that's not true. So what I would really like to see, let's see what the budget looks like at a strict 2% over 92 million, and work from there. And then if we don't like what the budget looks like at that point, then we'll have to, maybe rethink things. But to me, it's got to be very difficult from an administrative standpoint that at the end of the budget process, when the state comes in and says, well, we're only going to give you 20 or 30,000, now, like you said, it's total crunch time, and we're cutting things that may really not, that should not have been cut if we were given enough, if we were given enough thought in the process. So I think now, this is what we're doing now. This is the long drawn out, this is the big picture, this is the macro here. Let's see what the budget looks like at 92.3 million, inflated by 2%.
One thing's for certain. Our presentation has illustrated that there's approximately $7 million of new costs, and I would estimate out of that 7, 4.5 to 5 are mandated. There's a deficit of new costs over the amount that the cap will allow you to grow under its current estimate of about $4.2 million. It's going to be a Herculean task to get this budget to cap and to balance with that kind of deficit of need over restricted resource growth. So to restrict resource growth even further just exacerbates the problem. It is administration's recommendation, therefore, to take the very conservative cap allotment as it exists, whatever that number will be as defined by the state, which is meant to be suppressive by its nature, and budget to that amount, and to make up the $4.4 million through the budget refinement process and the very rigorous budget defense rounds. Cuts are going to be needed. They will be presented to the committees along the way. We will need board members' participation in that. But from a macro standpoint now, using the very big numbers presented to you before, $7 million of new needs, $2.8 million under the very suppressive cap growth, leaves a $4-point-something million headache for administration and the principals and the vice principals and the supervisors and directors to deal with. Again, we are not getting the number of resources to keep up with the demands in this district, even by going to cap.
Mr. Prezioso?
We can't forget that we're looking to pass a referendum, and if the taxes go up like they did last year, it's never gonna pass, and we're just gonna throw away $100,000 in the pre-referendum costs. So Tom's got a pretty good idea that at least we should try to see if we can keep that to the 4%.
2%.
Anyone else? Mr. Ryback, you...
No, he said 4, I thought he meant 2%.
No,
But you just had
2%
a
plus.
look on your face that looked like you had a question or something.
That's 2%, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone, Mr. Nostine?
I just don't want to beat a dead horse, but we do, from what I'm hearing, is that there is a chance that the enrollment adjustment might be backed out anyway down to 20. Is that correct? There's always that chance?
There's a chance. There's a
Right.
chance
So-
that it could grow more. There's a chance that it could grow less, depending on how the state allows you to grow your budget cap. But one thing's for certain, and it's indisputable. The cap is not growing enough to meet the district's needs. Even by going to cap, we're over $4 million short. And as your chief financial officer, as the expert in the district's financial affairs, I say to you that it's going to be very hard to meet the students' needs of this district by budgeting anything less than whatever the cap allowance is from the state. Still, we're $4 million short.
And I just was wonder if, isn't it easier now, since we have 12 months or 6 months in advance, to see what the budget would look like should the 663,000 turn to 20,000? Isn't it more beneficial to the students to look now and really cut things that we may want to cut because we can look at the big picture as opposed to having 4 weeks to cut $640,000?
No, it seems, from my understanding, to be squeezing a bigger square into a smaller hole. You know, the professionals who are in the business of constructing the budget here, Dr. Kozak, Dr. Alvik, and I, are really raising the red flag and crying uncle here at this meeting, because we can't close the doors on the new students coming in, nor can we ignore the facility needs with leaking roofs, nor can we keep buses on the road that are unsafe, and nor can we ignore the special ed mandates for resource room and in-class support. Do you know that resource room placements require 1 teacher for 8 students? And most of those settings also requires a paraprofessional. We are really up against it, even with going to cap. Going to cap is no luxury. It is a suppression of spending. And that should be the starting point. We will have to refine this budget over $4 million just to get it to cap from there. To start at a lower point scares me very much.
Okay, I thank everyone for your questions and comments. And this is one of the reasons why I had talked to Mr. Gorski about our not tonight actually making taking any action in terms of the budget philosophy, so that everyone has a little bit more time to think about this, to look at this information that we've been given tonight. And if you have additional questions, you can certainly, I would think, direct those to Mike or Dr. Kozak. But I did not want us to feel that we were rushed into having to support a budget philosophy the same night that we were receiving the information on it. So I hope that you will take advantage of the time that you will have. And I believe that it will be on next week's agenda. Yes. We haven't yet, okay, so you might anticipate that we would be looking to actually act on a resolution concerning the budget philosophy next week. Ms. Kalapanovich, did you have a question or
You
comment?
don't want a resolution read tonight?
Well, you could certainly make a resolution. I would prefer that we, I mean, this is my own personal opinion, and prefer to give the board more time before they are asked to actually vote on this. But if you want to make a resolution, then we can we can vote on the resolution to see what happens. Yes.
You know, the consideration of a resolution, it will result in a directive to administration to begin this process. You know, with $4.4 million of new appropriations in excess of, you know, this oppressive cap, we need to begin that as quickly as possible. If the board was able to pass a resolution tonight and make that philosophy to go to cap, it will begin the construction. I would recommend no later than the next meeting for an adoption of a resolution either way, because we need our marching orders. We need to know, in Mr. Nostein's analogy, what flavor of cake to start mixing at this point.
I completely understand that, but I don't think that waiting 1 week is going to greatly set you back in beginning to do that budgetary work. But is there a resolution that someone wants to make on this? Ms. Arminio?
Would it be appropriate in Robert's rules if I asked to table that until next week?
To table what?
Table the resolution?
No resolution has been made.
All right, we'll make one and then I'll table. I know it's coming.
Okay, I move that the Board of Education establish and adopt a budget philosophy for the 2016-2017 school year to responsibly meet the demands of continuing significant student growth and facility needs, as well as program and service requirements, by budgeting to cap without the ability to utilize bank cap and without consideration of budgeting above cap by going out to a vote, while prioritizing the following items subject to the restrictions presented by administration. 1, construction projects as presented. 2, curriculum recommendations as presented. 3, salary and benefit increases as per contract and as presented. 4, transportation recommendations as presented. This action by the board will enable the board to fulfill its educational responsibility to district students in a thorough, efficient, and fiscally prudent manner, while non-committently ensuring the maintenance of district resources and facilities.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion. It has been seconded. We've already had a rather full discussion, but is there any further discussion?
Well,
Ms.
I move to
Arminio?
table it until next week.
Okay, then are you making a motion to table that?
Yes, I moved to table the motion.
Okay, then we have to vote on tabling that resolution. Mr. Gorski, roll call.
The motion to table is a priority motion, which immediately requires a vote. Motion to table made by Ms. Arminio and seconded by Mr. Nostein. Ms. Arminio?
Yes.
Mr. Braverman? No. Mr. Zarneski?
No.
Mr. Mayo?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
No.
Mrs. Koloponowicz?
No.
Mr. Nostein?
Yes.
Mr. Prezioso?
Yes.
Mr. Ryback?
Yes.
Mr. Poi?
Yes.
Motion to table has 5 yeses. That is not the majority needed. Motion to table does not pass. Mrs. Kolopanowicz's motion is back on the floor.
Point of order. I just have a question. I know that you had said that the Jamesburg rep is eligible to vote. Could you please just tell me which of the 4 items in the agenda where it says he's eligible to vote on would pertain in this situation, please?
Many of them. The one for facility needs, the one for curriculum and teachers. These were intimately discussed with council prior to this meeting so that I'm prepared, and it was council's opinion that because those 4 items are so interwoven in so many of the new initiatives that you've seen in the presentation, that Jamesburg is allowed to vote on the budget philosophy.
I mean, I will definitely like to see maybe we can get an advisory ruling from our legal counsel on that, because I really don't see how a send-receive district who has basically their tuition fixed at this rate to Monroe would be eligible to vote on this, because their tuition will not change no matter what our budget philosophy is.
I appreciate your comment. We could seek a written opinion from council. I am reiterating what our conversation was before. She definitively said yes.
Okay, so that brings us back to Mrs. Kolopanowicz's resolution. It has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, then we will go to a roll call vote.
This is Mrs. Kolopanowicz's resolution.
This is to go to CAP.
It's to go to CAP, prioritizing the projects in a manner to get to CAP. Ms. Arminio?
No.
Mr. Braverman? Yes. Mr. Zarneski?
Yes.
Ms. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Koloponowicz?
Yes.
Mr. Nostine?
Abstain.
Your abstention is noted. Mr. Prezioso?
No.
Mr. Ryback?
Abstain.
Mr. Poi?
I have a question for you before I cast my vote. This same resolution can be introduced, if it does not pass tonight, it can be introduced again at next week's meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
Okay. Then I vote no.
That's 5 yeas. Motion requires a majority of the board, which would be 6. It appears we have a stalemate on the resolution. Motion does not pass.
Okay. Thank you. I see that we're about at 2 hours now. I would suggest, before we move on, because there's going to be another presentation with quite a bit of deliberation, I would move that we go into a recess so that we can refresh ourselves a bit, go to the restroom. I think there are some drinks in the back room here. And Ms. Thornton, since you have been here the whole time and will be doing the presentation, you're certainly welcome to join us. Okay, this is not going into closed session. It's just a recess of about, I'd say, maybe 20 minutes, something of that sort. All right? Thank you. Okay, the Board of Education will now come to order again, and at this time, we will have a presentation on the board self-evaluation being given by Gwen Thornton, our NJSBA, what's the word I want? Field rep, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. It's a pleasure to be back. And I have to tell you that I thoroughly enjoyed listening to your budget philosophy conversation, and I commend you for having that now, because the construction of the budget is such a time-consuming piece for your administrators that providing them with adequate direction now will really make for an easier budget process moving forward. So really having that discussion now and coming to agreement around how you want to move that budget forward is absolutely imperative. And so I congratulate you for taking the time to really go through that at the macro level. You'll be working on it all year, right through, March. And unfortunately, things have not improved at the state level such that we could in any way think that there are going to be any additional monies that are going to be coming forward. So I think that that's an important piece to keep in mind. You did your self-evaluation, your self-assessment, and you have in front of you, I know that Mike sent it out to you via email and also in hard copy, the final report on your self-evaluation. And typically your self-assessment is really used to help you identify what you were most effective at in terms of your governance processes and procedures, and also to identify moving forward those areas that are of priority for you as a board and those areas that perhaps you would like to do some additional professional development. So they really should guide you in creating your district goals as well as your board goals. You will recall that your board goals refer solely to the way you operate your processes and procedures, and your district goals are the ones that you are responsible for developing in collaboration with your administration. Your administration will create action plans to make progress toward or to achieve those goals, and you will evaluate your superintendent based on the progress toward achieving those goals at the end of next school year. And so really it's about developing a shared vision around where you would like to see your district be at the end of the coming school year, 2015-16. And really, one of the pieces around your budget is that whatever goals you set, you need to make sure that you are providing the financial resources necessary in order to achieve those goals. You cannot hold someone accountable for achieving goals without providing the financial wherewithal to accomplish those goals. So as we think about goals for the school district in the coming year, you need to be mindful of the costs that would be involved in those particular pieces. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity this year. You have a brand new superintendent, Dr. Kozak, who is a very experienced superintendent. I've had the pleasure of working with Mike over the last several years in several different districts over my time with the association. And so I'm delighted to see him here in Monroe, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the board and your administrative team to move forward in a very collaborative way, and to really create a new day here in Monroe where you can come to consensus around what needs to be addressed, what is important to you. One of the pieces that I found most exciting and delightful about your self-assessment was that you identified student achievement as your top priority. And I think that speaks volumes. Monroe is a high-quality school district, and one of the reasons for that is because your board has always put student achievement first and foremost. And so I would encourage you to continue in that vein and direction because, as you know, that is why you are here. Goals are really the foundation for effective policy development. You rated your policy as being up to date and going well. It really does help you in terms of looking at your total program and figuring out those things that are most important. Excuse me. It is a way to communicate to your community and to all of your stakeholders what your priorities are for the coming school year, what you are focusing on. It should be a part of your every day, every week, every agenda piece that you do as a Board of Education. It should drive the work of your committees so that if you have a finance goal, for example, that would be worked on in the Finance Committee. If you have a curriculum and instructional goal, you would work on that in your Curriculum Committee and so forth, okay? Looking at your goals, we know that every part impacts another part. You can't work on one without impacting another. And so really taking a systematic approach to goal setting is important. And there's a governance cycle that I know most of you are aware of. We're setting goals now for the 2015-16 school year. Those goals will be in place for September, and then you will receive updates periodically on the progress to those goals and then use them to evaluate your superintendent in the May-June timeframe, and then next summer create a new set of goals for the following year. So it's a cycle and it never ends, but it is a way of making sure that you have a specific focus for your district, okay? We really do believe that looking at various pieces of data can help you to develop wonderful board goals. In Mike's budget presentation, he showed you the data around student growth. He showed you the data around the costs for various items, capital improvements, roofs, and all of those kinds of things, your buses. All of that kind of data really does help a board to be able to make well-informed decisions. And there are a number of places that you can look at for data around student achievement and around all areas of operation of the school district. So we really do believe that it's important to look at those kinds of things. In addition to looking at data around student assessment and achievement, you can look at the other kinds of data to look at school climate and culture. For example, you can look at violence and vandalism, suspension reports, culture and climate surveys that may be done with students and staff and community members. All of that provides you with additional data points and information that will help guide your work, okay? The state and the Fed have produced certain benchmark standards that are included around all of those areas that you need to be working on. As you know, your curriculum needs to be aligned to the Common Core for the moving forward in all areas. They've established turnaround principles through the federal government. You don't have any schools that are turnaround schools in your school district, but we do have some, and there are a series of changes that districts sometimes are required to make if their schools are really struggling to succeed, and those are the turnaround principles. So in terms of goal development, the district goals are really owned by everyone. You set them in collaboration with your administration, and we will be talking with your administration tonight around what they've identified as being the priorities. Your superintendent may have merit goals that tie back into the district goals in some fashion, if that's in the contract. And then, of course, you have board goals around your processes and procedures. So as you're thinking about developing your goals, we suggest that you look at various pieces, okay? And I want to go to, here is your mission statement, the Monroe Township mission statement. Here is your vision statement that speaks to what you want. And I think the most important piece really is the vision. And I think it's worth reading out loud, because I think it's so critically important, and that is that the Monroe Township Board of Education commits itself to all children by preparing them to reach their full potential and to function in a global society through a preeminent education. I think that that is a wonderful vision for the children in your community, and I think you need to keep that in mind as you talk about shaping the goals moving forward. You have in place a strategic plan that was done several years ago. There were 3 goals incorporated in that strategic plan. These were the very broad-based objectives that came out of that. And first of all was to create a user-friendly system that provides all stakeholders to help shape the educational program and facilities transmittal of information to all stakeholders. Actually, this is a lot of lovely language that really means you want to communicate and engage your community. I think that that is an ongoing challenge for lots of boards of education all across the state. You talked a little bit about the need to go to referendum, so making sure that you are communicating on an ongoing basis with all stakeholders, not just parents, but with all citizens in your community is absolutely essential. And I think that this provides some level of framework for this year's goals. The second one, regarding district finances to assess current and future facilities needs. You've begun that process. You have an ad hoc facilities committee, correct? That is looking at what you need to do to make sure that you have adequate classroom and educational facilities to support the increased enrollment of students all across your district. And then the last one, which should probably be listed first, is really around curriculum and instruction, making sure that you have articulated the curriculum across all schools, all grade levels, provided equity for all students, and using curriculum that is evidence-based, research-based, and aligned to the Common Core that integrates technology and character education. And I think that goes back to your vision for the whole child that you talked about in your particular vision. So these goals are still there. These are really very broad goals, and as you think about your goals for next year, you may want to align them in those 3 categories or those 3 areas. Okay? Here are last year's goals that my colleague Alan Nunziata developed with you last August when I was not here, and that was to continue to adopt the strategic plan and implement the goals that we just looked at. Identify and develop a schedule for looking at some of your programs, including AP, Advanced Placement, and AVID programs as measured by student success, and then seek viable sources of alternative district revenue, which I heard Mike talk about in terms of the preschool, after-school care program being run in district as a way to generate revenue, and there was another one. Thank you, summer camps, again, as a way to raise revenue. So I think clearly you have met that goal around alternate revenue, and you're to be congratulated. That's not a small piece. Districts, again, are all trying to find ways to generate revenue as the state aid remains frozen or even less in some districts, even though they're talking about hold it harmless. So as we think about goals for next year, I always like to ask our administrative team what their priorities that they've identified as being what you need to focus on. This is what last year's goals look like. These are what your strategic planning goals that you have in place look like. But you have a new superintendent, and I really would like to ask from his perspective what he has identified heretofore as being those key pieces. Mike. I'm left-handed, so I can't do it backwards.
Well, thank you, Gwen. Based on information that not only from tonight, but conversations that I've had with the board, my research into the district and the previous goals, concerns and challenges that the board has brought forth, and of course, certainly the information not only from Mr. Gorski and Dr. Alvich, but also the leadership team, meaning all of the school administrators, principals, supervisors, directors, assistant principals. I've come up with a couple areas to look at, and now these are general type goals that I think would be aligned with the Board of Education and the direction that the district is going in. I certainly do not have them refined or developed into any sort of an action plan. Tonight was just to introduce these ideas. So I'm going to mention a few of these areas, and then we'll open it up for discussion on that. The one area is communication. And there is communication, there's a communication system within the district. However, I think that an expansion of that communication system could only benefit the school district. And what I mean by an expansion of that is, in addition to areas of what I'll call meet and greet, where I would like to get out into the community, perhaps have meetings in the township library, perhaps the community centers, invite people into the district at either morning meetings or evening meetings. That would give me a chance to meet members of the community who I might not normally have a chance to meet during the school year. And it would give the people, the members of the community, a chance to also voice their concerns, the things they like, the things that they think are challenging or that are of concern to them. Along with that, I would like to move into areas such as Facebook and Twitter, social media. We already started the process of looking at there's a system called Constant Contact as a way to disseminate information on a pretty regular basis out to the community. And, you know, so many people now rely on their phone that this would be almost a push-out type of notification. So in addition to hard copies, which we could put out in the library and different places, we would also open up the opportunity for people to receive regular updates through either email or text or social media so that they would be able to receive that on their phone, laptop, iPad, whatever device that they're using. I think that many of the families and community members now are used to having information sent to them rather than to go out to a website. So that would encompass a number of different areas. One, school districts, public school districts in particular, are no longer a monopoly, and I think that's a discussion that's been occurring. And I think all of you received the school board's magazines, both the New Jersey and national, and that certainly was in one of the last editions. The idea that, you know, what distinguishes our school district from other, sources of education out there for parents. So we have to get that information out to them, kind of the way a business would look at marketing or branding. And I think that the communication would enable us to do that on a regular basis. There's so many wonderful things going on in the classroom every single day. And I had the privilege of visiting a number of the classrooms back in June before I even officially came on board. And just through 1 or 2 days of walking through the schools and seeing in the classrooms, let alone all the research I did based on test scores and other types of information, this is a preeminent school district. And I think that too often people in the community may not be aware of all the wonderful things that are going on. So the more ways, the more methods that we have to disseminate that information, I think the better. And I think that also keeps the focus on what I believe our core mission is and what Gwen certainly alluded to, and that is the instruction, the delivery of instruction to the children in the district. There's also the concern that there could be a need for a referendum down the line for additional building expansions of facilities, and this would certainly create a vehicle to both send out information and receive information by increasing areas of communication. So it would serve, more than a dual purpose, really a multi-purpose in that area. Another area that has come up, so that would be one goal, would be kind of couched in the area of communication, expanded communication. Another area, there's a concern with rising cost in the district, and I think that every district faces that. Certainly, lack of state funding, many different, areas of concern with that. One of the drivers of cost in any given district are our special education cost. And while we certainly want to provide the very best services that these students need, we also want to be cognizant of how we deliver those services, and are there more efficient ways to look at that and maybe another way to address that. So with that idea, what I would like to propose is possibly having an external audit done of our special ed services that would look at all of the services from kindergarten through 12th grade and would come up with ideas based on ideas that are being implemented not only in New Jersey, but in school districts across the country. I've had the good fortune of having an audit done in another district, and for the cost of the audit, the information that came back I thought was extremely valuable. And it helped really bring new ideas and strategies into our district, which definitely would benefit our students, but it also streamlined some of the services as well. So I would like to explore that area as a possible idea or method to not only to look at, are we providing the best services we can to the students, but are we doing it in the most efficient way? Of course, increasing students' academic performance is always an area that I'm interested in. And one of the ways that I think we need, one of the things I think we need to do is to really use data to look at that. And just like Mr. Gorski tonight presented so much information and really had great data there to support that, I think it's important that we constantly use data to look at how are we delivering education, how are the programs working, how are our students achieving. And we have a summer administrators workshop, basically called SAW, that just occurred today and Monday and Tuesday. And today we brought in a company to present, well, actually several companies to present different programs, and they were basically both very centered on data. The initial feedback I received, and Dr. Awich, maybe you could elaborate on that, that seemed to be very positive on really using that data to disaggregate that, the student population, to really drill down and to look at skill areas and to look at different areas and see, are we delivering education in an equitable manner across the district? Are these interventions that we're applying, are they working? How do we know they're working? Or is there data to support that? And it's the technology, this district has certainly invested considerable revenue towards technology in this district. This type of data and these types of assessments would work very readily with the existing data that or existing technology that we have. So I think it would be a nice complement to what we have in this district to be able to implement some of these programs. And teachers they're busy teaching. For us to ask them to now devote time to create something, to pull data, to type data in, to data entry. I mean, that's really beyond what they should be doing. We're hiring teachers to really care for our children, to teach our children, their time should be spent on taking existing data that's presented to them and saying, okay, now I have this data. Let me look at how I can apply this in my classroom. How can I use this to further benefit the students in my classroom or classrooms in the case of middle and high school? And how can I use this to really help drive the instruction? So using some of these systems takes the cumbersome task of typing in something and creating something, and why reinvent the wheel? There are systems, there are strategies out there, there are assessments out there that we can certainly use that would apply to our district. The one system that we looked at today, actually, there's a shared data section where constructed item responses that are aligned to park that can be done in any district, a number of them in New Jersey, are shared. And basically what the person was saying was, again, why reinvent the wheel? This is already done. I mean, a lot of teachers do this already through Pinterest and other types of social media, teachers paying teachers. They're out there creating ideas and they're sharing them with other teachers. So I think that would be a good use of that, to do that. So basically that goal would be revolving around using data to look at our programs and to help inform our instruction. With the academic programs, not as a separate goal, but really part of that is you probably know, I have a very strong interest in what I'll call STEAM, the science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And certainly that would fall under the what I'm looking to do with driving instruction or informing instruction. And with that, I also am looking to try to look at corporations and universities to become our partners in helping us achieve our goals. So in the case of universities, there's many different ways that we can do that by using the expertise of professors, of programs, of possible apprenticeships, internships, anything to bring interest to our students, to especially some of the careers out there where there will be jobs available when they graduate. And in the case of corporations, very similar type of things where they bring in maybe their research scientists and certain engineering firms or certain other corporations that have those kind of people on staff that can come in and help. Financially, certainly, that's something I'll be looking at. There are a number of corporations that offer grants. That really, would require having a person devoted to that full time to really go out looking for grants. It's a pretty cumbersome process, but it is something I am interested in doing. And I would like to start that process this year to look and see if there are any type of corporate grants out there that can help us with the move in the direction we want to move in, specifically in the area of STEM or STEAM. So, you were writing all that down? Thank you, Gwen.
Trying to chunk it into categories so that then the board could think about each of those categories moving forward, and then if you have anything else to say, I feel like Anna. Can you do that? Now we'll do this side. I'm dating myself.
No, I'll give you the microphone back.
Okay. Thank you. Yep, I've got it. You may have noticed on your self-assessment final report that was sent to you today, the challenges that you identified, and you did talk about the need to expand public engagement with community stakeholders. That was identified by the board. Maintaining teaching and learning as a priority, which I think speaks to that curriculum piece that Mike was just speaking about, and the use of data and the audit of special education, I think goes to looking at those efficiencies when you were just talking about, to Tom's point about budgetary pieces. Doing that audit, I think, will help you to find perhaps some additional efficiencies. I would point out, and Mike didn't point this out, but the state only provides you for state aid for special education based on a particular percentage that the state has said a district should have. And any percentage of students you have classified above that percentage, you get nothing from the state. And it's about 14.7, 14.9% that the state says every school district should have. So they are only giving school districts special education aid for 14.9 of the 20% of your total students who are classified. So I think it's important to note that. That's another area where the state is pretty arbitrary in how it remunerates school districts or provides state aid to them. So looking at your special education program, making sure that you are providing really high quality services in the most effective and efficient manner benefits both the district, but more importantly, it benefits the students. So perhaps that's an area you want to think about. But those were the challenges. The only one that's not here that you really identified, but I think you have already gotten a handle on that, is around the growth of enrollment and facilities. And that is already on the agenda for you as a board, for the administration, through the ad hoc committee, and through the work that you're doing on that. So you may not need to reiterate that as a district goal. But how does this strike the board in terms of priorities for the following, for next year? I'm sorry, am I in your way? Can you see this? I'm sorry. I'm trying desperately not to. Sure, let me just read them to you. And these are just my notes. They're not put into goal statements. They can be refined into goal statements. But expansion of two-way communication, not just putting out information, but having a dialogue with your community, with the stakeholders, through the use of constant contact, social media, in-person meets and greets at various times with the superintendent. I think that will also go a long way to establishing your new superintendent as your educational leader, which is a critical piece that I know the board is interested in. The second one was around an external audit of special education to provide quality services to meet the needs of the children in a more efficient and cost-effective manner. And then the third one was to improve student academic performance through data analysis, to evaluate program effectiveness, drive and inform instruction in the classroom through differentiation and whatever the data shows that needs to be done within the classroom. Thoughts? Tom?
I guess my only concern is how are we going to quantify? How are we going to quantify the third item there? I think the others, we could probably see, but how would you plan on quantifying the third item?
When the third item is which
one? Improving student performance through data analysis to evaluate program effectiveness. My take on that is in terms of deliverables so that it's measurable. It would be to look at, for example, the data that comes out of some of the assessments that are being used, and then be able to show to the board how instruction was either changed or a program was eliminated or a program was added to respond to the data that is collected around student achievement. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the point that you're looking to do. Is to use that data to drive and improve instruction, as well as eliminate programs that perhaps are not as effective as you had hoped they would be, and implement new programs that would be more effective.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the action plan typically has the metric that you're going to be using. Is that correct?
Oh, it does. Okay. It does. They're SMART goals, so it has to be a way to measure it. And Gwen, I would add on the academic part, the third goal. Usually in that area, when I would set a goal with that regard, I would be looking at a specific area of academics. So if we looked at all the data and we decided that math in grades 6 to 8 was below the area that we were hoping to achieve, we would look and say, well, okay, what can we do to strengthen our program or the delivery of instruction, and how will we measure that? So if let's say using New Jersey Ask data when it was New Jersey Ask, we saw that there was 80% of the students were proficient in grade 6, and we wanted to raise that to 84%. That's an easy way to set a quantifiable goal. The challenge that I would have this year is with Park being administered last year, we don't know what those scores are going to look like. It's going to be pretty tough. So what I would like to do, if we used that goal, we could do it one of two ways. Certainly the way Gwen mentioned it, which is looking at programs, although to quantify that, it would be kind of tough. But you can have qualitative goals as well. They don't necessarily mean, you can kind of quantify a qualitative goal, if you will, by assigning some sort of a rubric to it and doing things like that. But if we kept it as an academic achievement, then I would certainly work with Dr. Alvich and look at the areas we have and the other types of assessment data that we have currently, not including Park. Park right now is too volatile. We don't know. We haven't got the results. We don't know, how many kids participated, didn't. We don't. So using other types of data, we could look at that and see if there's any area from K to 12 that we feel that we would want an improvement in academically, and then set goals based on that data. So it again would come back to a level of proficiency and increasing that level of proficiency.
My only concern is there a way to do that, say, and look more at the parity of grades across all the schools? Because I think we've had that discussion relatively to the different schools being in.
Certainly. And, we looked at two programs today, as I was mentioning, and the one that I was really interested in, and I think that Performance Matters, that received the most positive feedback. That's a system, it's a software system that's used in Montgomery Township, it's used in Cherry Hill, it's used in school districts across the country. And when you look at it, they're usually high-performing school districts that use this particular software. That certainly gives us the ability to look at the instruction, or the outcomes, if you will, from grade to grade, from school to school, down from student to student. I mean, Doug in particular, you're a former math teacher, I believe, right? I was kind of wishing you were there today, because the gentleman used a lot of examples in math in particular. And it's pretty powerful. So that would certainly be able to provide us the type of data that we would be able to look at. And, any good school district, just like any good business, really needs that data to look at and to examine, are we doing what we hope to do, and where are the areas that are our strengths, and where are the areas that we have concern that we need improvement on. But you need the right tools to do that. And absolutely I could do that, but I would need the software to go along with that, to make that possible. I mean, but certainly we can certainly do that. And you can break it down. I like data and things like that, so I don't know, I might come across that way, but I was really excited about this. They can break down that data by all the different, you can disaggregate that in almost any way that you want to do it, and you can sort it in that way. That's basically all just glorified Excel spreadsheets, but you can disaggregate it by socioeconomic means, by ethnicity, by cohort level, by high ability, low ability, where they're moving, what the expected rate should be, the expected growth, if you will. So you can really break it down into multiple ways. And based on one of the videos I saw of the board meetings here before I was here, when I was doing my research to interview, I went back and looked at as many board videos as I could. I do remember hearing that as a comment that actually Dr. Alvich did a very nice job presenting data. And I think that this would even be able to give us even better data. And by you nodding your head, I take that as an affirmative. And I think that the board would really appreciate having that. And I certainly think that it would help our administrators and our teachers to be able to look and say, this is working, this isn't, and how can I, address this?
Mike, I just didn't notice it up there. I don't know if it should be included, number 3, but the partnering with the universities and the businesses and the seeking grants.
Yeah,
Support.
I was almost afraid to put that out there, to be honest with you, Mr. Ryback. It's something that I've done in other districts. I've had connections. I've met with the provost at Drexel. I've gone to other corporations and universities. But again, that's a hard one. When I try to measure that, that's a hard one to measure because you never know what kind of reception you're going to get. We had ExxonMobil in one district that sent science teachers down to the Mickelson Science Academy for training, but sometimes that's a hit or miss, depending on the corporation. So, and I also, I wanted to be realistic in looking at. We have growing enrollment. There's a possibility of putting an ad hoc committee together to be, which I'm assuming I'll be a part of that, to be moving ahead, to be looking at possible expansion, plus these other goals. And I didn't want to overextend myself as well, but I wanted to kind of throw it out there. It's certainly an interest of mine, and it's certainly something that I've done before, and I would continue to do that. I was just a little reluctant. I probably shouldn't have even thrown it out there, but I was a little reluctant to throw it out there because I would be afraid if I put too many goals out there that they wouldn't be achievable. Yes.
The second one, the audit of special education. It seems to me that that's the bullet point of where you want to save money. Why can't we do all the programs to see where we could spend money from top to bottom, save money from top to bottom?
Well, that's not a bad idea, but I would take one step at a time. The audit for special ed, just to give you an idea of what's involved in that. The district that I did that in was only slightly smaller than this district, and the amount of time it took to collect the data was probably 2 to 3 months. Volumes of data, and that taxed the resources of the district because we had people scrambling to gather that data for them to send to them. Then they came out in 3 full days of interviews with parents, with teachers, they didn't interview students, but administrators, Board of Education members, and they took all that and they compiled all that data, and then that took them another month or 2 to put that together in a presentation. It was a year-long process. So I think if we started with special ed, especially hearing the numbers around 20%, and that could provide a roadmap for us, and I wouldn't expect anything magical to happen in the first year, but it would provide a 3 to 5 year roadmap to implement things such as a stronger RTI program, it's called, the acronym stands for Response to Intervention, and it's part of also something called a system-wide what's that, the other acronym of systems and supports. But basically the idea is to work primarily in that K-3 area, K-2 area, and try to provide as many resources as you can to the students before they become classified, to try to help students and a lot of times with reading comprehension and reading and writing skills and communication skills, and try to work with those students early on to see if you can get them up to the level by the time they're grade 3. I mean, there's a lot of research that says that if you can get them to reading level by grade 3, they're okay. There's different levels of maturity, and kids, advance at different stages, but if you can get them to the same level by grade 3, you have a better chance. It doesn't mean that you won't ever have students classified, but it means that it's a more rigorous process before they're classified. You go through 3 tiers. The first tier being, what kind of interventions can I do right in the classroom? And by the way, this involves a group of people meeting together and analyzing data and looking and saying what's working, what's not. And then the second tier is, okay, what kind of resources can we apply that are maybe outside the classroom to bring into the classroom or bring into the student? And then the third tier, by the time you go through this, if the student's still struggling, then the third tier is possibly looking at either classification or some other kinds of services. I'm sorry?
Who's going to do the audit?
Well, the way we did it before was we put a RFP out, a request for proposals, and we received proposals from, I think it was 5 or 6 companies, surprisingly, all of them outside of New Jersey. To give you an idea of the cost, that we were talking about 4,300 students, and the cost was around $35,000 to do, well, the proposals ranged from anywhere from about 22 to 23,000 up to 125,000. We looked at all the proposals, and again, that's time intensive as well. And after reviewing all the proposals, the group of administrators that I worked with, we then went to the board and presented the companies that we had, and the company that we recommended based on that. And the cost was around $35,000 for that entire audit to be done, to be completed. That included the people flying in, 3 days, data crunching. I mean, really, over all the data that was sent to them, plus the data that they were able to collect off of our website, the state website, and different areas that they could go through. And I remember a board member, after looking at the cost, he said, okay, so what does it cost to send one student out of district? And we said, well, anywhere from 50 to 100,000. So he said, for $35,000, you're telling me that we can do an audit of our entire special ed services from K to 12. So the board agreed to do that. Now, I can't guarantee that it would come in at $35,000. I don't know what the prices would come in at. But the idea is to at least put something in place to, to look at what we're doing. And the company that came in and did this in the other district, the ideas they brought back were wonderful ideas. Things that we could create in district to help us identify these students, to provide services. And they'll take any direction you want, that the board wants. If the board says,
that if they do see that there's a 20% savings somewhere, that they're going to cut the budget for special ed for 20% or 15%, whatever it is, and you might not see, we just might take that money away from those kids who need it the most,
right,
and put it someplace else.
I can't speak for what could happen, but I would certainly think, and I would certainly say for myself, that
it's labeled as special education, so that's where the money's going to come out of.
Absolutely. And the idea that I have found, and this is not only from this audit, but in really my entire time working as an educator, I never want to take anything away from a student who needs what they need to do. Some of the areas we did look at, though, were things like, okay, so I don't want to predict something that might not come out of the audit, but as one suggestion, you have a certain number of paraprofessionals over the course of a district. In an entire district. Is there a better way to deliver the services by maybe putting 2 teachers together who you have, not hiring anybody additional, and meeting the needs there? Is there another way that you can, maybe a standard operating procedures, so that what we found is in some schools, when the child study team, the case managers met, they might offer these type of services. In another school, they might be a little different. So it provided more of a consistency of, how things should be looked at, the kind of services. But it was never, ever meant, and nor would I ever advocate for anything that would take anything away from a student, especially our special needs students. When I go into those classrooms and I work with those kids, your heart goes out to, not in sympathy, of course, but they're, some students are faced with some pretty severe challenges. This is not in any way to diminish that, not at all.
And I would point out and I'll be quiet, NJSBA had a special task force looking at special education because it is such a significant cost for almost every school district across the state. And there's a report on the website that talks about doing those kinds of audits, finding additional ways to provide quality services at a cost that is more affordable for districts. And I think that's the intent here, not the diminution of services at all for kids,
right,
but rather to be able to do it in a way that really meets their needs and perhaps is a way to do it more effectively.
And if I could just interject one more thing, some of the, and if you get the hook to take me off, I'm talking too much, but some of the research has shown that some of the students, not the students with more severe needs, but some of the students who have been classified over the years in many districts and in many states, they found that, looking at students maybe in 7th or 8th grade, that a lot of these students just couldn't read. And it wasn't that they couldn't, it was that when they were younger, maybe reading didn't come as easy to them as it did for other students. So maybe by looking at different approaches and more intense services when they were younger, we could help them become better readers when they're younger. All right, so there's a program called Reading Recovery that was used in a lot of districts around the state, and that was the whole intent of that, to put really intense services at these for these kids, directed at these kids at this young age, to really help them help themselves to achieve those skills. So certainly, again, not to take anything away, but to help them early on and give them the services that they need when they need them. It's easier to give these services to students at a young age. Usually by the time they get to be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, sometimes they become discipline problems because they're so frustrated. You know, it's like going in and to a foreign country and not understanding the language, and you go in to order something in a restaurant, and the waiter or waitress keeps on talking to you in the native language, and you're saying, well, I don't really understand, and you can't even point to a picture, and they're just like, keep on speaking. There's just that lack of communication, so the kids get frustrated. So the idea, again, is to help them.
In your previous district, did you find any efficiencies to save you money, and if so, how much?
Well, it comes back to the direction. The auditors will work in any direction you want. So some of the companies that sent us our proposals, some of them promised, and some of those companies were asking $125,000. They promised all kinds of savings. And when we looked into them, and these proposals are sometimes 100 pages long or more, their basic strategy was to go to all your out-of-district students and bring them back in the district. Well, first of all, that's not always effective. Sometimes the district doesn't have the resources needed for those students, so it's a short-term win that you might save money the first year, and then you find out that it doesn't work for the students, you don't have the resources. It's really not sustainable. So we were looking for very specific things. This district might look at something else. If we said to these companies, we want to look specifically at how can we save money, they'll do that. If we say to them, we want to look at ways to provide consistent measures of how we apply our services to special ed students, they'll do that. They'll do both if you want, to a limit. They'll, how many goals, it's something that's achievable. So it's hard for me to say that they'll come in and do any one thing. They come in, it's individual. They come in, they sit down with the administration, they sit down with the Board of Education, and they talk to and they look at all the data. And then not only do they get your input, they get the input of teachers, of parents, they look at all this, and then they come back and they make recommendations. It's not mandated. They say, based on all the information, based on the direction you gave us, here's what we recommend, and to move forward. So I found it very interesting. I'd be foolish to sit here and promise you anything and to say, if we do this, we will save X number of dollars. I can't do that. That would be irresponsible for me to do that. I can, however, say, having gone through this, I've had audits in 2 separate districts that I thought were very informative, that the information that came out of both of those audits really helped our child study team, our special ed teachers, our administrators, our principals, our general ed teachers. And ultimately, that benefited our students. And it's hard. Benefiting the students, you can't look and say, well, did they increase their test scores right away? Did you decrease the number of students who were classified? That's over a 3 to 5 year period. There's no magic bullet or fixes that, you can come in. These are complicated issues. We're talking about kids here. We're not selling products. We're talking about kids' lives, and they get one chance at each grade. We don't want to mess it up. What we want to do is the best we can for these kids. So it's really with the goal of looking at how can we improve the services. And just in all fairness, I because this is a board of committees, when I spoke to Mr. Poi about this, I was going to bring this to the curriculum committee as a topic. But since we were talking about goals and the committee meetings are tomorrow night, I thought it best to address it tonight. Yes.
Talking about data and data gathering, I have no objection to that. I think it's good. But and across the board, not just for special education. I mean,
Sure.
I think we should do some type of data gathering, and then, analysis and everything by the leadership teams. But as a goal that I would like, and it's sort of a raw goal, we can sort of refine it, but is disseminating this information by explanation, not by raw data.
Oh, absolutely.
And by perhaps, and I don't know how feasible this is, perhaps having workshops at least one workshop a year, a school year, in each school about that school, about the data you gather, depending on what direction it goes in, and have teachers, administrators, and parents, and even maybe us once in a while, that attend these workshops just to listen. I mean, that's an outreach, it's data gathering, it's helping people explain. Again, it's just an idea, it's some kind of goal I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Well, it would be, I would think, part of the action plan for both the communications goal and the data analysis piece would be part of your action plan that would include that outreach to the community at least once a year with explanations around the data to help educate and inform parents.
Yes, but more specific than that. That's too broad. I'd like to see a goal of actually communicating in each school.
Well, if I could speak to that for a second. Part of what my goal would be is to make the use of data not a special event, but an ongoing type of the way it's used. So for instance, one of the things that I've always stressed is when parents come in for parent-teacher conferences, and I haven't been here in Monroe, so I'll certainly speak of my own experience as a parent, and I'll certainly speak of districts that I've worked in. Too often, a parent comes in, and you sit down with your son or daughter's teacher, and yes, they're doing great, here's the report card maybe, this or that. Wouldn't it be nicer to have, here's the reading level that your son or daughter had in September, and here's some interventions, and here's where they ended up here, here's where math is, so the use of data doesn't become a special event, it becomes embedded throughout the district. Now, as far as special presentations by school, we have to be careful with some of this as well. The one system I looked at today that I like because there's, with an easy click on the part of the software, you get rid of the names. We have to be very careful with the use of student data and also teacher data and how that is disseminated. We can't identify specific things. We can certainly look at it by school, we can look at it by district. To present the data out to the school and to the parents, I certainly would talk to the principals. I think that's certainly a place that when they have parent meetings, whether it's a back to school, might be a little early for that,
right,
but at different times during the year that they can certainly, we used to do some things in different districts where maybe on a certain night we would have something at 7, but at 6 o'clock we'd have parents invited in to look at a special presentation, maybe on a program, on data, on, we used to do it for when Park was coming in, we did it when the Common Core was, so it would be a special walk in the park night or a Common Core night, and we invite parents out just for about an hour. More than that, we may still be excited, but, the eyes glaze over.
Presentations are great, and I think they're informative, but I'm looking for more of an engagement with parents, an opportunity for them not to be spoken to, but to be more like a round table kind of thing. So that would be something that I would see as a district goal somewhere.
I could be off base here, and Gwen, I'll certainly ask you to tell me if I am. But I think it's the responsibility and duty of the board tonight to essentially set some goals and not get into how those goals are going to be accomplished, because that's really getting into the action plan. And that's the job of the superintendent and the administration and the building principals to design how are we going to accomplish that goal. I think we just need to focus on what do we want those goals to be and let them determine what the action plan is. Because if we get into discussing how we want them to do it, we'll be here till midnight just trying to figure out one goal. I also want to be, I'm a little leery of having too many goals, particularly in your first year, Dr. Kozak, because you're new to the community, you're new to the district. So I would say, let's don't go beyond 2 or 3 district goals.
I would not recommend going beyond 3 district goals, which is why Mike came up with those 3. I threw them up here. The board is responsible for saying what they want to see happen. Expand communications, evaluate programs, outreach to the community. The how it happens, Doug is absolutely correct, is the responsibility of the administration, and you will be able to see that happen through the development of action plans that will outline the hows. Here's how we're going to accomplish that goal, which I think would incorporate what you were just talking about in terms of those roundtables, dialogues, and I think that's reflected in the two-way communication piece. Those action plans will come to the board so that you can see them. You don't get to approve them or disapprove them. You will hold your superintendent accountable for his performance at the annual evaluation. Now, when you look at those action plans, and if you see that there's something that you think is so critically important that's missing, certainly it's worthy of a suggestion to the superintendent, but the how those things happen is really their job. You need to say what you want to see happen, and how it happens is really his responsibility, and the onus is on your administration to make that happen. Lou?
Yeah, so we got 3 of these up here, right? These are the big ticket items, right?
Correct.
The way I see it, two of them I can measure easy. I could put dynamics again, and I could put analytics against. I could figure out whether we're good or bad. One we can't do is the communication. Communication, one that we have, as it's outlined there, is not measurable. And my concern is that we're missing one entirely important goal that nobody isn't brought up, and that's the addressing an immediate need of addressing the growth and facility needs that we have in this district. That is a goal. That should be number 1 goal. Of that, a deliverable can be expansion of the community, expansion of the communication, because having lived through that a couple of times here, there's not just the immediate need of getting information out about what we're doing, but managing dis and misinformation, because sometimes not everybody agrees with what we're doing. And there could be a contra group that's going to go out there and kind of say the reverse of everything we're doing. So that should be a deliverable or an action item of the meeting of the district's facility and growth needs as being the goal. Make that a deliverable instead of a goal. The goal is important stuff. That communication one, the one we have it out there right now, the constant contact thing or social media or stuff, that's a byproduct or an action item of a bigger goal, and the bigger goal, in my mind, should be the facility and growth issue, but that's just me.
Thoughts?
Can I ask you a question? Okay. So I agree with what you're saying, and that's certainly an important area. And I guess for my purposes, the question is, are there board goals, and then are there district goals as separate goals, or are we looking at one and the same? Are the board and district the same here?
They are not. The board
Okay.
goals refer to their processes and procedures, and they should, in a sense, support the district goals, but the
Right.
district goals are your responsibilities, not the board. Now, if one of the goals was to address the enrollment growth and facilities needs, then perhaps one of the board goals is to help communicate the need for a referendum or to support the solutions developed as a part where the board supports the administration, but not doing the administrative work.
Yeah, and Mr. Kaufman, just so you know, I mean, I did think about that, as listing that as one of my goals, but I also knew that there was talk of an ad hoc committee, and I thought that might become a board goal. And certainly a board goal, I feel that even though I'm not a member of the board, if you will, a voting member of the board, it's certainly something that I would be very heavily involved with. But I can certainly change this goal to make that more to deal with the expansion, because that is a very real issue, I agree.
In the past, what we did was, it was a superintendent's goal, because you would be the educational leader, leading the leading the ad hoc to a certain extent. We have a chairman that ran it, but you kind of lead and guide us through the forest, right? But the board, in their goal, would be to support your activities there, attend the meetings, participate in other working groups that might break out there. And clearly, you know, if there's policy changes that need to happen or whatever, we support that infrastructure to make that as a deliverable. But I think it's so important that it needs to be like the big goals, yeah. Because there's so much tied to it.
If I can, just to clarify, and maybe it's only going to confuse the issue, Lou. Last year, when we discussed and adopted district goals and board goals, okay, it was a board goal to receive, review, and act on the recommendations of the ad hoc committee on growth and facilities. So that was a board goal last year. I don't think any of us are denying the importance of what we have to tackle, but there may be some confusion as to what category does it fall in? Is it a district goal or is it a board goal? And I don't know if it makes a big difference one way or the other, because we know it's got to be done, you know. So maybe, Gwen, you can throw some light on that.
And I would think that it really is the superintendent's goal, meaning it's a district goal, because you're going to have to mobilize all the resources of the district to develop a plan and then to begin that process moving forward. Your business administrator is going to be intimately involved as you complete the question for the referendum and you get bond counsel, et cetera, et cetera. I think, to Lou's point, the board goal should really be to support the efforts and plan that is developed and recommended by the administration.
We're going to take care of it either way. I just think it's, like you mentioned, it's a district goal. That's where that should be.
Yeah, I would agree.
For my own, I mean, I'm fine with that. I think that's a good point.
So would the board be comfortable with implementation of a plan to address growing enrollment and facilities needs?
That's a good way to put it.
Sounds good enough to me.
Thank you, Lou.
Although that will never happen without good
Gwen, I
communication.
think instead of implementation of a plan,
No, that was.
Gwen, if I may, instead of implementation, I think it's just development of a plan. Because wouldn't the implementation be the actual, the building itself?
Well, I think it's beyond just the need to develop a plan. I think you need to move forward, right? So I think it's perhaps to plan and begin implementation. In other words, I don't think the board wants to go another year without a solution. Am I wrong? I mean, I think there's a more immediate need. So I didn't want to just say a plan, because that would seem to me to say we have until June to figure out what we need to do, and I'm not sure that you have that full year. But that's up to the board. I'll write however you would like. But I think it's a more immediate need, perhaps, or maybe I'm interpreting it incorrectly.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think we need to have a plan and start to move forward, whether, you know.
And I would tell you, if the plan ends up being a referendum, that's a multi-year goal. Right. Because you're not going to accomplish it in 1 year. In a year, you might be able to get that referendum on the ballot. Hopefully it passes. In year 2, you're going to begin going out for bids, beginning construction. It's going to take, you know, it's a 36, 48-month goal, essentially, to do this between the time you decide to do it and the time you open a new facility of whatever type that happens to be. So it becomes a multi-year goal, and I think you need to chunk that in your action plan. Here's what can happen in year, you know, what you intend to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4, and that will depend on the plan that you all agree to moving forward.
That's why I think it should be develop and implement.
Okay,
because
that's...
in the action thing, we'll see the development of the plan.
Right.
I'm assuming you will make the communication piece an action item under that goal around to support the goal.
Gwen, I
Yes.
just on one of the handouts you gave us.
Yes.
It says everyone owns the district goals. The superintendent, in our case, is responsible for their completion.
Right.
So technically, we are, and we're doing it now, but we are involved in the setting the district goals, not just the superintendent.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That's why we're having this discussion. I mean, truly,
The board goals and the district goals
need to align.
No, the board goals and district goals will absolutely mesh, but my point is, it's not just, with all due respect to you, that
Oh, no.
your position on the district goals, it's the collaboration.
It is a collaboration. And that's why, but we always begin with really asking your educational leader what they have identified.
Okay.
Because they are your educational leader, they're responsible for the full district, we really begin, and then the board says, yeah, but no, we need something else to lose point.
Okay.
This is really the burning priority, and that needs to take precedence.
Okay.
So,
I'm just reading the handout.
okay, good job. All right,
Good points for reading that. Not everybody reads everything.
okay. Are you all comfortable with those 3 goals? So the first one would be to develop and implement a plan. Again, this is not in final language, but a plan to address enrollment growth and facilities needs, external audit of special education to provide quality services to meet the needs of children in a more efficient and cost-effective manner, and then improving student academic performance through data analysis to evaluate program effectiveness, drive, and inform instruction.
Can I just
Yes, please.
improve academic performance?
Well, we can use whatever language you would like.
Yeah, to improve the academic performance without having the benefit of having at least a year in the district. And even though I looked at a lot of the data, the data that I looked at, the New Jersey Ask, is no longer relevant, and we don't have park data, so I'll be looking at new data. It would be hard for me at this point tonight to be saying specifically, yes, I'm going to improve academic data. Could we possibly change that to, using at least data to, help inform what we're doing? Because I do want to quantify things, and I have done that very much in the past, where I've quantified, 3%, 5%, 6.2%. I've done all that, but I'm just, without even knowing what data I'm going to be even looking at this point, I think it would be a little hard to quantify it just at this point.
You want to say using most current data
No, but he's.
to inform?
Yeah, using data sources to inform our instruction, and I can certainly quantify that, I guess, or at least qualify that with showing the steps that were taken to provide the tools, to provide the resources for administrators and teachers to use. And once we have those systems in place, it'll be much easier than to quantify and say, now that we've looked at the existing data, I think in this area, this grade and that grade, we can certainly look to improve the academic achievement. If that's fair with the board, if you're agreeable to that.
Well, I just want to be careful that this communication item that we first put up there is not lost sight of, because I think the district has recognized it's in our strategic plan that we developed some years ago as one of the goals was to improve communication. I think in our own self-evaluation, we felt as if we were lacking in community relations and communication.
Sure.
And certainly, when it comes to talking about a building referendum, communications will be vital to that. But what we need to communicate, both two-way, extends beyond just the building referendum. I think we need to be talking to parents in terms of, are you happy with the instruction your children are getting? Are you happy with this program? I mean, you can get a lot of valuable feedback from parents that way. Are you comfortable with the homework assignments, the length of homework, the amount of homework? Are you comfortable with our starting time, et cetera? All kinds of different questions can come up that have nothing to do with the building referendum, but that have to do with the quality of your school system. And I think it's very important, because I've always felt we didn't do enough communicating in the community, particularly with these huge number of retired citizens that we have that provide so much of the tax money to the community. There's really minimal communication that's occurring there. And I think it's important that we don't lose sight that communication maybe needs to be a separate district goal, the improvement of communication. And in terms of how do you measure it?
How do you measure it?
Excuse me? How do you measure it?
He's going to be accountable for how you measure it.
Well, how many times did something go out this way or that way? I know Dr. Kozak has already set up this email newsletter, okay? And people can get his newsletter once. I don't think you've done your first one yet.
The opening letter's out there already.
But where you can receive his newsletter, you don't have to go to a website, you don't have to get the newspaper, it'll simply come in your email, and I thought that's a fantastic way to communicate.
Or if I set up meetings at different places, maybe for a year or whatever, that would be another way to measure it as well.
I think it's all great. My challenge is over the last few years, because we used to have I forgot what we called it. It was like
Key communicators?
we had a newsletter we sent out
Monthly.
like every
Oh,
month,
the
right?
school
And
story.
school story.
Yeah,
right?
school story.
Sending it out and getting it read, two totally different things.
Oh, I understand that.
Right.
I understand that. And I actually thought it was a waste of time and money from what was in there. I thought it was a lot of fluff and not a lot of substance. But we have that Channel 28, the community access station. A lot of people watch that. A lot of people watch it, and I think we make minimal use of it. We have that fantastic TV studio right here in the high school that I think we're making minimal use of. And I think we can make a lot more use of those things in terms of communicating to the public. That wouldn't necessarily be so costly, like sending out a hard copy of a newspaper that you don't know if anybody reads it or not. Well, you don't know if people are going to tune in, but they're more likely to tune in because I just know from the way people talk. I don't know about you, Marv, in your community, but I know in my community, they watch Channel 28.
I'm amazed at how many people do watch it. And I might tell you that I just had a comment yesterday. Guy told me he watched our last meeting, and there's no reason why we shouldn't get paid more than the town council.
So I don't want to lose sight of the point. I just feel that communications is important enough, and it's been so lacking, and it's been identified over and over again. It's in our strategic plan, it's in our board self-evaluation, that we need to make it a district goal.
Okay, President Poi, I think you sort of contradicted yourself, though. I mean, we didn't want to give Dr. Kozak too much, but could we ask him to take one more little goal?
Well, I think it's a matter of deciding which of these do we want to go with. We don't necessarily have to go with all of them.
Well, there's only 4 now. If we, well, there's 3.
Well, currently, we added the facilities one, and we said you could subsume the communications piece as an action piece under that. But I think Doug's point is it's too important to subsume it under the facilities enrollment goal.
Right, so that
So then
means-
the question becomes, are you comfortable with having 4 goals as opposed to 3?
That's a lot.
Not that I'm
Well-
putting you on the spot or anything.
No, not at all. This camera is facing Not a problem. I am comfortable with 4. With all due respect, I just hope that everyone remembers this come next May or June, because there will be a lot of work in each one of those goals. Certainly getting the information out about the possible referendum, and I mean, that's a lot of time as well.
Yeah.
The meet and greets, that takes a lot of time. The special ed audit takes a lot of time, and certainly using data. But I think they're all really valuable and important things for the district. So I would.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Bless you.
I would like to I think the 4 goals are I don't mind doing that. I feel like I'm a hard worker, and I'll do that. And I think I have a great team here. But I would also ask that I'm able to afford some of the resources that I will need to accomplish that. Such as if we do an audit, then there'll be a request for proposals. There will be a cost to that if we hire someone. If we use the data, there will be a cost to get one of those data systems. Not an outrageous cost. Well, that's too relative of a term. But, for me to attempt to accomplish these goals, I do need resources to be able to do that. So, and again, if it comes to the point where the audit recommendations come in, the special ed and the proposals, and the board says, no, we don't want to do that, that's okay, but then I won't be able to accomplish that part of it.
Mike, just fast question. The data systems, is that a one-time cost, or once you buy it, you have it?
Usually it's a one-time cost, but with any service, there's always an annual cost with it. The annual cost, from my experience and from what I even heard today, it's minimal compared to the initial cost. The initial cost is they have to upload your data. There's professional development to train people. So that first year you get hit a little harder, And after that, once it's up and running, there are maintenance fees, some of them as low as a few $100s, some few $1,000s. It would vary. And I with all, in all honesty, we didn't get to that part of the conversation to get actual quotes. Today was just a presentation, but there are some recurring costs, as with any system, even the systems we're using now, there's always a recurring cost.
Yeah. I'm just going to say one more thing about the communication thing, and then I'll shut up, I promise, for the rest of the night. Probably.
Don't promise.
I think what's going to happen is when we go and we start doing the things that we outlined here in these goals, especially the district growth and facilities thing, a lot of these things are going to happen by attrition, right? So the community involvement is going to happen because you're going to have ad hoc. The dissemination of information is going to happen because the PTO people will be there, they'll get out this information. You're going to have the coffee things anyway to talk about the district plans and all these other types of things. So a lot of that stuff is going to happen by attrition. And that's also something that we're going to be able to measure too, because Steve, I think you could remember when we had the very last ad hoc meeting, wasn't the best meeting, right? So we kind of got that. If we're trying to think about how we measure things and what's quantifiable that we could figure whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, those three we could do, right? And the communication thing, because it's a byproduct of what we're going to do, and it was a byproduct of what we had in some of those meetings, we're going to know if we're getting our message across, if it's going well, or information's dropped off, or disinformation caused us to derail, or who knows what happened. So I think Doug's point is valid. It's very, very important. Does it rise to a goal level? I will still say no, because it will be subsumed by literally all of those other activities that are up there, because we're going to have to be telling people why we're spending money on special education audit. And it could go the other way. We could do the audit and find out we're underfunded. You don't know, because it goes the other way, right? The other things that we have up here about analytics, about reviewing where we are for the performance, there's numbers. You could tie those to things and we can figure out what we're doing and where we can cut costs and how things are going to go better. So again, I'm just going to say one last thing, that I think that the communication piece, a lot of the things we have relative to communication, we already have at play. We have the Global Connect thing when we have to send out an emergency notice. There's a lot of things that we already have today. We have Channel 28. That'll continue. If we're going to talk about communication expansion, maybe you can host these TV events talking about the referendum thing and have it education night on Channel 28. There's so many other things you could put in there, but they're pieces of that other deliverable. It's, again, I'll just say, I don't think it rises to the level of a communication goal, because it's going to be interwoven into all of those. So,
What does the rest of the board feel?
I've been here just a little bit longer than Lou, and even before I got on the board, the number one issue has always been communications. So no matter what we did or how we did it, people would still say, well, you're not communicating, I didn't get the message. And we do a lot more communicating than we did 15 or 20 years ago. I do think we can do all the communicating we want. We can't make people read what we're disseminating. And I think that's the issue. Maybe a communication survey to see how the best way to communicate. We used to have a community relations committee, remember, Lou? And we had the whole community coming together. And they would disseminate back to whatever organization, whether it was a PRC, whether it was the PTAs, whether it was the League of Women Voters. And we still we don't get any of the information. So I believe with what Lou says, that communication is part of everything we do, but I don't think it needs to be the goal that we're doing. Everything we do needs to be communicated. We just have to keep working on finding that best way to reach everybody.
back in the day, I made a comment at a board meeting. We literally used every medium of communication except smoke signals. We had literally print, we had video, we have stuff now where you can see our board meetings, Channel 28, because they're archived. There's so much out there, and we still have people coming in getting it wrong because they heard from somebody else or telephone or what have you. So again, I said I'd shut up, but I love it. So,
Other thoughts from board members?
Perhaps what we need is an organization, an organized process of using Channel 28. The problem on Channel 28 frequently is we have some school production that was recorded by some amateurs. You can't hear them well, you can't see them well, and I'd rather have nothing on that channel than that kind of junk. And that's a problem. We have the studio, as you said before, but we've never invested in people to run that studio. And that's what we need if we're going to be the eyes and ears to this community.
I just want to add, I feel kind of funny because I'm agreeing with everybody. So the one thing Michael, one thing you said I think that we need to be aware of is I think a live kind of communication where like in the library or you going to a development or something where they can actually, because we had Channel 28, which I think is great. We've had articles written and sent out, but and admittedly that they haven't served the purpose or the goal successfully. But I wonder how often we tried actually sitting down with people, like there you are, and inviting them to come see you in the library, or going into the library where so many people are there every day.
And I have to agree with that. The in-person, you can send out all kinds of communication, but in-person communication is still, I think, probably the best way. Now, having said that, one of the board members already has me scheduled for an in-person meeting, and I certainly, yes, Mr. Braverman, thank you. And I certainly welcome that. I would certainly be relying on the board members to help me with identify where would be the best place, or a community center or a different place to help me with that. As members of the community, I would certainly need your guidance and assistance in that matter to, identify important areas that I could go to. So, and I think that would help, that in-person communication, in addition to the other kinds of communication.
One thing you can do this year, right now, don't have multiple back-to-school nights on the same night. Give the school time to have you present. You should be at every single back-to-school night. Don't double up on the back-to-school nights, because board members are challenged too. If they want to go to a back-to-school night, they got to kind of split between this school or that school. Don't double them up.
And I haven't looked at that schedule yet, but I agree. I usually go to all the back-to-school nights. And the other problem that having back-to-school nights on the same night presents is parents with kids in different schools, different grade levels. Now, if it's their sister school, they're across the town and they're on the same night, they wouldn't affect the parents. I understand that. I know that scheduling has got to be, scheduling is a nightmare when you try to schedule that. Dr. Howard, do we have the back-to-school night scheduled? Are there any on the same nights?
There may be, because the
Who's the
problem is
mic?
there's only so many evenings, there's only so many evenings in September that they're able to schedule them. And with 8 schools, that's the difficult piece. So there may be somewhere, it may be Woodland and Brookside may be on the same night because it doesn't involve the same parents.
Could we stagger the times? I've done that where maybe one starts at 6, one starts at 7. I'll go to the one school at 6, maybe just short greeting to people, talk to some people, and then they usually want to go out and see their kids' teachers. And then that'll give me time to get to the next school. So maybe that's a way that we can look at doing that.
All right, so where are we in terms of the communication piece? Does the board want to just not have that as a separate goal? Doug, would you be comfortable with not having it as a separate goal?
Well, as I sat and listened to the communication that happened here tonight, it became apparent that communication is quite important.
I agree.
And yet, many people voice the fact that it has been less than effective, which to me raises the need to improve communications. So personally, I feel we need to set as one of the district goals the improvement on communications. But I'm just one person.
Right.
We could go with 4 goals, as Gwen, you mentioned.
Well, I would rather go with a few goals that we can really do well, that we don't have to spread yourselves too thinly to try to get them done. And while we do it, because I think one of the things that we were lacking on in the past is that we get timely progress reports on how is that goal developing, so that we see the action plan by a certain date, this was supposed to have taken place, and then somebody reports back to the board that did or did not take place, or, well, we didn't quite finish it, we expect to finish it this coming month. Because sometimes we don't get those progress reports, and that was something else that was mentioned in this board self-evaluation.
And I would strongly suggest looking at your board calendar and identifying 3 meetings between now and May and do an update on the district goals exactly that way. Label it as such, give it on whatever goals you agree upon on each of those areas and provide an update. I mean, I think that's really helpful. Oftentimes boards get that information, but it may not be labeled an update, and so you all are so busy and there's so much going on, sometimes you lose track that you've gotten that information. So I think labeling it as such, it also helps your community to really, those who are watching it on 28 or who may be in the audience, to really understand these are our areas of focus, this is what's going on, this is what we've accomplished, and I think that's an important piece for them as well. So
I can build that into the action plan.
okay.
And the board should, we should put that on the agenda too. So we'll identify 2 or 3 times between September and June.
Absolutely, perfect. Okay. But we have no resolution here on the goals. Yes, Jill.
I think since the data one and the special ed one are both going to cost money, we should eliminate one of those. And I think, in my opinion, we should eliminate the student data one, because the special ed one will look at efficiencies, and that may help us in other areas, in money or in maybe even classroom space. That's just
Or delivery of program.
Or delivery of program. I know the student data is something you love.
Well, would it be fair to say that if we eliminate it as a goal, that if it's affordable and that it can still be accomplished, that we still proceed with using data or using some sort of way to measure data?
Yeah,
That's a freebie goal.
If it's what?
It's like a freebie goal.
A freebie goal.
No, I actually think that one of the things that we've always talked about is efficiency and getting efficiency across the board. I almost think that that's very, very important. I mean,
Data.
the data, and because we're looking for efficiency and effectiveness, and as Mr. Gorski pointed out, in order to get to the numbers that we need, we're going to have to be very effective. Not necessarily cut things, but very efficient and effective, and that is going to be a clear way. I mean, sometimes you have to spend some money in order to save a larger amount. So, depending on what the numbers are, we could always say that it's unaffordable if we find that.
Sure.
Yeah, and if we say it's unaffordable, then it wouldn't be fair to Dr. Kozak to say he did not, get his goal measured. So I think this segment of this meeting should be very clearly, you should have a very good minutes on this segment and keep it in your file.
I just want to add the use of data, Jill. I understand where you're coming from, but I think, having data as really a systemic part of your system is key in maintaining academic excellence. Is one of the things that we pride ourselves on here, and if we lose sight of that, we may see some diminishing returns there, and I'd hate to see that happen.
He's agreed for all.
Mark.
I personally, I don't see it as a goal. I see it as something that should be ongoing. And it's just something that should just keep on going. It shouldn't be a goal that we're pulling it out of the air somewhere.
Okay, so would the board be comfortable?
To some extent anyway?
Yeah, our district has been doing that for the last 2 years, using data to help with, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Using data. I think that was something that the board 2 or 3 years ago had said that we would start to do that. And I think we've been moving in that direction more and more.
Well, in a couple things there, yes, the data should be ongoing. It should just be a part of that. And also to what you're saying, I think the use of data is ongoing in the district. I guess from my point of view, it would be to expand that use of data. There's many, many different ways to collect the data. And in all fairness, with Dr. Abbott, she knows more about this than I do. Based on what you saw today, not to put you on the spot, but based on what you saw today and the systems we have in place, do you think what we saw today would be a duplication of what we have?
The program that we saw today, I don't think would be a duplication of what we have in place, but I think it would definitely enhance what we're already doing. Part of what we do right now is in K-2 is the RTI process, the response to intervention process. And that each team at each of those schools meets every 8 weeks. That's the reading specialist, the basic skill teacher, the classroom teacher, and the principal. And they look at what Dr. Kozak mentioned, the tiers of intervention, and how they can help these students, and really looking at what the teacher can do in the classroom. So it's not an extra cost first. So looking at what the teacher can do in the classroom, how they can differentiate their instruction in the classroom. Right now, that process is paper-based. So every child, the principal has a binder about 6 inches thick by the end of the school year of all of that data. So to have something like we saw today, to be able to input that data in and give us instant analyses would save time for all of those certificated staff that's putting in so much time to do this, to meet the needs of the students. It would enhance what we're already doing.
Okay.
So is that like a software program that you're looking at? Well, couldn't that be put in the budget as a priority?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's
what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily have to be a goal. It could be. It really should be just an ongoing part of operations. But when I was looking and listening to all the different concerns and different items brought up, and the data one in particular, I went back to whatever month it was last year. I mean, I looked at so many videos. I don't remember what month, but I pulled that out of one of the board presentations or the board meetings. So I put it up as a goal to float it out there to see. But I do agree, it's not a goal so much as it should be just a part of operations.
Yeah, that's the way I see it too.
Yeah.
So we will remove it as a goal. It will be part of standard operating procedure, implemented through the budgetary process, hopefully, as a priority. And then we will keep the first goal around addressing enrollment and facilities needs, the second one around communications, and the third one around special education. Is that good for the board? Okay. All right. Perfect. The last real piece to this evening is really looking at your board goals. I have up there the goals that you had for 2014-15. I'm delighted to say that the first one we absolutely can say with certainty you accomplished. Sitting there.
We don't know yet.
Okay. Secondarily. See, I knew that one.
Not only did we accomplish it, I think we did a good job.
You did. That's what I mean. Secondarily, you completed the board's self-evaluation. I would hope that moving forward, that all of you will participate in that process moving forward. This year, it was more of you than last year. There wasn't even 5 of you that completed it last year. So this year we got to 7, which was great. So that I would say is partially complete. But hopefully next year you will do it again and really be able to look at how you have functioned. Yes.
Does the Jamesburg representative complete that? Is he part?
He should have completed it.
So we should have had 10.
Yes, you should have had 10, absolutely, because he's a full voting member of the board, even though his voting is limited to items that concern Jamesburg, he is still a full voting member of the board. The next one, and you'll have to tell me, review the board.
I just want to clarify. He might have done it. I'm not saying he didn't.
I don't believe
But
that
it
he
doesn't- we
did
don't- we don't-
because he was not on the, well, I know why, because, and it is a point here, he was not on the district listing, which meant he couldn't get in to access it. And I don't have access to the database. It does require your business administrator to go in and do that. So moving forward, just so you know, Mike, you need to go in and enter him as a member of your board, or whoever is the Jamesburg representative after reorganization, so that they can then participate in those processes. Because if he's not on the board list. And interestingly enough, in 9 out of 10 times when we have a send receive, they're never listed. And I don't know why, and we keep after our IT people, because for us in the field, it's a problem with board members. They get upset, and I don't blame them. And then the BAs get upset because the board members complain. So we want them listed because they are part of the board. They absolutely are. Review the board committee organization structure and processes. I don't know what you accomplished in light of that this year. Nothing. Is that still something that you would wish to carry forward, looking at your committee structure and how you work through that? I don't know.
Well, there's probably a need, and once again, based on
Use the mic, Mr.
some of the things that I read in the board self-evaluation, there's probably a need for us to spend some time talking about that in terms of the communication among the various committees, among themselves, as well as communicating with the full board. I noticed that some members of the board said that that communication was not happening. They didn't always know what was going on until they got to the board meeting or until they got, to something. And so there seems to be a need for us to do something with the processes probably. And
Doug, I'm sorry, but Mike, if I'm wrong, correct me. Didn't you say that you were going to put in your every Friday your report that the updates from the committee reports?
You're once again, you're very timely in your in your statement there. I did, and it's actually a lot of the information's already there. I haven't gone through that and shared it with everybody because I talked to Mr. Washington, Reggie Washington, the IT director, and we were trying to figure out how he could come in and offer a training to the board on showing you how to access it. But I've already started putting agendas in there. It's all set up, almost set up and ready to go. And that would certainly, it would be a shared folder so that everyone would have access to it. You would, well, as board members, it would only be available to board members. But if a committee met on a Tuesday night and the information was put in on Wednesday with the notes and the agenda, then everybody, especially the people who are not members of that committee, would be able to access that. So we're pretty much ready to roll. It's just a matter of trying to figure out when I can get that training in, because I think there's varying levels of comfort with using Google Share Drive. So as soon as I can get that training in, we're ready to go, and hopefully that'll help with that process.
okay.
Will that address that concern?
Well, I'm not sure because I don't know, if there's other members of the board that have concerns.
I know, Mr. Board President, we had a discussion about what members can be on certain committees, and you had told me that that's part of our board goals to address that committee structure and the members of the committees. So,
Well, yes, and that does bring to mind two questions. I know there was a question about which committees could the Jamesburg rep be on, or should not be on, that, and I don't think we've actually definitively discussed that or had that resolved, and we would probably need to get board attorney's advice on that. And the other question, wait a minute. Sorry, it was there and now it's gone.
story of my life.
Everybody's life.
Oh, there was also the question, although I keep revisiting it because I guess I'm finding it difficult to accept the answer, in terms of how many people can be on our committees because of the makeup of our board and what gets discussed at some of those committees. Because sometimes the committee is only discussing items which have nothing to do with Jamesburg, and yet the Jamesburg rep may be on that committee. And in a case like that, we should not have 5 members present at the committee meeting. At least that's my understanding of the way it works, because then we have a quorum.
Right, you cannot have a quorum for a committee meeting.
That's
No
right.
matter who constitutes that quorum.
On that topic, I just want to reiterate the legal opinion that I had from Vi Lordy at the time at Willens. And she emphatically said that in the instance where a matter has nothing to do with one of those 4 items that Jamesburg is statutorily able to vote on, a quorum still exists of 6. Not 5, because it's not a Jamesburg vote and you exclude him. It's still the majority of the members seated on the board, which is 6.
6.
That's the opinion from Vi Lordy.
Keep in mind, you don't vote in a committee either.
You only recommend to the full board.
But you still
That's
can't
key.
have a quorum.
That's key.
Right, but you still can't have a quorum.
So you can have 5 people, but you can't have 6.
Correct.
So 5 people on any of the committees in Monroe Township's district
Right.
can be present. So, okay, so 6 is the quorum regardless of whether
Right,
the
because you have 10.
Jamesburg representative is a voting member or a present, okay. Oh,
And also, I think going forward, Mr. President, I think that we also may want to talk about maybe potentially different committees. I know Ms. Karpanovich brought up tonight that there used to be a community outreach or something.
Community Relations Committee.
Community relations. That may be something we may want to look at, especially with the concerns of the board as our communications with the public concerns. That may be something we may want to revisit. And so I think personally, yeah, maybe a technology committee. I think personally it might be something good to keep as a board goal going forward.
So certainly you can keep that as a board goal. So and I just made some notes here around which ones you want to have, what is the makeup, how are you going to communicate, I mean, to the Google Docs piece, which is fine. Any other thoughts around district goals? I mean, excuse me, board goals? Would you like to have a board goal around support of the plan for the facilities and enrollment growth? Since the board goals should support the administration's goals?
Makes sense.
Yes? No?
How do you measure support?
You don't have to measure it.
Oh, well, how do you measure, you're not, in terms of the boards, you're not really measuring it in the same way you would be measuring the superintendent's performance, but you would be looking at, that's very hard to answer because it depends on what it turns out to be as the solution for your enrollment growth. If you decide not to go out to referendum, then you're not going to be going to public meetings supporting a referendum and talking about it and educating the public. You might be doing something altogether different. I don't know because I don't know what the plan will look like. But so maybe that's not an appropriate goal then. Maybe that's not.
I guess my question is, with the superintendent's goals, they have to be measurable. Do
Correct.
the board's goals have to be as measurable?
No, they do not.
Okay, that was where that question came from.
They do not.
Okay.
I mean, they can be as measurable, but they don't have to be because you're not employed, you're elected.
Okay, then that's fine.
Okay? Does that work for the board? Or are there other things that are of concern to you? You're looking skeptical, Lou.
I don't know did we conclude the discussion on the committees?
I don't know. Does anyone have anything to add?
Well, I'd like to say that our committee makeup, we have a policy for that, and I think the policy committee can handle that. I don't think that has to be a board goal.
So you think it can be addressed through revision to policy?
Right.
Make a recommendation to the board, and the board would vote on it.
You could do it in that fashion if you wanted as well. It's really up to the board.
Tom?
I'd like to see it kept as a board goal. Obviously, it was on there last year. Policy didn't do anything about it. And I think that it's pretty important at this point that we come up with something. I think it's asking too much of policy. Policy typically has a full plate, and I think that this is important to have this as a board goal.
Well, and one of the outcomes to looking at this may be to make recommendations to policy with revisions to whatever current policy exists. So if you're going to change, for example, and you're going to add a community engagement committee, or you're going to add a technology committee, you would probably need to add that to the policy. So that could be a recommendation from the full board to the policy committee to make those revisions to your existing policy. So you could do it in that fashion as well. But in terms of a second board goal, does that work to provide appropriate support in your role as board members once the plan is developed for addressing enrollment growth and facilities? Are you just so tired and sleepy you just want me to be quiet? And that's okay if you say that too. I'd be happy to do that. Pardon me?
Committed to finance.
You're not committing, you're supporting, you're agreeing to provide support to whatever plan may be recommended, but before it can go forward, the board has to approve that plan. So you're not going to support something you don't approve of. Okay, so you're not committing yourself to any one plan here or any one solution. You're simply saying, as a board, when that recommendation is made, and whatever that recommendation is that the board finally approves, then you will provide appropriate support. Is that good? Okay. Okay. I will get all of this back to Doug and Mike in the form of a memo so that you will be able to review it. Hopefully you will have it by next week's board meeting. Please tell me it's not Monday night.
No, if you wanted to add a third goal.
Okay.
I think it would be nice to get 100% of the board to complete the 2015 board self-evaluation and the superintendent evaluation.
You can't get 100% on the superintendent.
Well, I know that. 100% of the...
100% of non-conflicted board members for the SUP eval and 100% board member participation for the self. It's 100%. If you're conflicted out, you're conflicted out. You don't get counted as not participating. That's not your choice. That's the state's choice for you. So that would be fine.
Certainly measurable.
Can we increase the bonus pool if we make it to the 99 and 100%?
Yes, I'll triple your salary.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I knew you'd be excited.
Yeah. Let them eat cake.
Get up cake.
Should be after 2 now.
Okay, so you know that the next steps in accordance with all of this is your administration will be writing action plans for the implementation of the goals, sharing those with the board, and then you will have all of this and the cycle will move along. So, yes, Mike.
Would it be appropriate for me to write a resolution for the board to adopt both sets of goals at the next meeting?
Absolutely.
On your email chain?
Yes, absolutely. You would do that at the very next meeting. And or, if you would like, you could wait to the first meeting in September, only in the sense that you might have additional public who might be attending to hear those goals. You don't have to do that, but we often suggest that sometimes you either wait to September or adopt them at your next meeting and then ratify them in September when there are staff present, you know, your association reps are here, just as a way of communicating that these are your focus for the year. That's why we suggest it. So, okay. Thank you very much. As always, it's been a pleasure to work with all of you and good to see you. If you need anything, if you have any questions, let me know. I hope to see at least some of you at workshop in October in Atlantic City. It's a wonderful opportunity if you have never been to see it and to really make use of some of the resources available. So, thank you so much.
There you go.
Thank you, Gwen.
You bragging.
I wish I could write like that.
Scribble.
Okay.
It's scribble. I scribble, which is terrible.
Under our next item on the agenda, which is other Board of Education business, Dr. Kozak has said he wants to have a word, and Mr. Gorski also wants to have a word.
One word?
And I just want to say that I distributed to you tonight a report,
Just a simple
okay?
majority, you know.
That's on the per pupil cost. Okay, the last page of that report, I have to take a second look at that. I discovered it tonight during the meeting. that there's something there that I'm not so certain of. So the very last page, it looks like this. Okay, I think is your very last page. For right now, don't put full credence in the information that's there, because I have to check on some of the ranking information there. I want to do a double check, because I'm not certain that was accurate. Everything else has been double checked, but that one, I know I did it just the other day, and I was looking at it tonight, and I says, wait a minute, I'm not so sure that that's correct. So I will straighten that out for you, though, and give it to you in the future. I appreciate all the time that everyone has put into this tonight. I think we've had some very good deliberations. I think everyone spoke up, and they felt comfortable speaking up. I certainly hope you did. And even though your idea may not have prevailed, just like my idea does not necessarily prevail, I hope you haven't taken any personal offense by that, because we're acting as a board, and we're not going to always be in 100% agreement on things. But I thought it was a productive meeting. I know it's not the most pleasant kind of meeting to have, but it's one that we need to have from time to time so that we can see where we're going. Yes.
Great that we did it today instead of Saturday.
Agreed.
Yes.
Very much agreed. Just a very quick, only a couple words. The committee meetings tomorrow, just a reminder, we have policy at 4, personnel at 5, finance at 6, and buildings and grounds at 7.
To bring up a point about the committee things, they're too close. We cannot, especially in finance, we don't have enough time sometimes to finish our meetings, and we're rushing through. Sometimes this hour is not long enough. We have to be more flexible where we're able to at least discuss what we want to discuss.
I see validity to your point, Anthony, because sometimes we've had to either delay another committee starting, or we've had to go without completing the business of that committee. And I think that would probably come under this reviewing the committee processes and structures.
We put 4 together tomorrow. I mean,
so
that's never going to work.
I don't know if anything can be done in terms of tomorrow night. I'm sure that all of this was set because of our next board meeting on Wednesday, and you're just having returned this week.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Just on that point, Dr. Kozak and I also noticed that, and we have been limiting agenda items on a priority basis so that we don't overextend into the time.
General or just for tomorrow?
In general, starting, you'll see a difference starting tomorrow. We should be done in the allotted time. If not, we'll discuss, making the time longer with the committee chairs.
Okay, because that was one of our concerns once, that we don't have enough time, especially at finance.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Anthony. I've said that the committee meeting should be an hour and a half. If it goes less, it's good.
Well, at least give it a buffer where you have an opportunity to go forward.
So they're not right on top of each other.
Yeah.
Somebody could speak for 10 minutes, which is important because we're making a recommendation, and you know it as well as I do. We never get out of there sometimes, and sometimes personnel jumps on top of finance and all the way through, so.
Good point. Yes, Mr. Gorski is now going to apprise us of some information that he received during the course of the meeting tonight after checking upon the situation.
Yes. First of all, I beg everybody's pardon. This is the first time that this has happened to my knowledge. For a budget vote, it's required that you have a majority of the members seated on the board to pass that resolution. So that would be 6. And with the resolution that Mrs. Koloponowicz moved tonight, it requires not what a budget would require, 6, but a simple majority. And this was brought to my attention by a member, and I have reached out to Mary Smith on the phone, and I have also consulted with Gwen from school boards. Everybody concurs that the resolution tonight, whose vote was 5 yeas, 3 nays, and 2 abstentions, does meet the simple majority stipulation and has passed. I apologize for the confusion. Again, I aligned this with a budget, and it is budget philosophy and is different.
Well, we have to look forward, may I speak?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Prezioso.
Sometimes people are voting because, maybe abstaining, because they don't have the information at that time. Now, if this was brought up before the vote, maybe some people wouldn't abstain because it was important whether they believed this was going to go through or not. So all of this stuff should be done before we even come to vote. I don't think it's fair now that it's being overturned.
Mr. Nostine?
This goes back to a complaint I've had for some time. I've expressed it to you, Mr. Board President, regarding the Jamesburg rep. I don't understand why we can't have our agenda items listed in the order of the ones that he can vote on. I have sent you an agenda from Somerville High School. Branchburg is a very large send-receive to them. Their agendas are very straightforward, and it's never a doubt of what the Jamesburg member can vote on and what he can't. I realize that's not the issue that's in question tonight, but nonetheless, I think that this confusion, this constant confusion of whether he can vote, and that will affect some members' votes possibly, knowing it's either a 5 or a 6 vote majority. And so I think it's imperative that we do something about this. Like I said, I've expressed it a few times, and I don't know where it stands, but I think we have to make a move on this.
Okay, just hold on. Mr. Braverman?
I think Tom is 100% right.
Never happens.
On that point, Jamesburg's allowance in this particular vote is irrelevant. This passes with or without his vote, with still a majority.
That's what I said.
But I did, as I mentioned before, receive a legal opinion on this one that he would be entitled to vote on the philosophy. I try to be as transparent about that as I could.
Okay, and I appreciate that, but I understand that what Mr. Nostine is saying is to a different point. It's just that this happened to be a catalyst for it. But I do want a clarification here, and since this has come out. And Gwen, you're still here, are you listening?
I am, and I am.
My understanding has always been that whenever there are votes that are listed as abstentions, that those votes are counted in with whatever the majority of the votes were. I thought that's in Robert's Rules of Order.
It's in Robert's Rules, but it does depend on what your policy says. Sometimes, depending on your policy can say that it aligns with Robert's Rules and they are counted in the affirmative, okay, with the majority. Or it can say that they're completely neutral. They are neither a vote with the majority nor the minority on a particular vote. Okay. I don't know what your policy manual says.
Does anyone, Kathy, do you, because you've been on the...
I can't.
Okay. Yes.
I can tell you that
really don't
they
think
have
so.
never counted toward the affirmative, and an abstention has always been cast when perhaps information was limited and a poor person missed a meeting, or just chooses not to vote. It would never have counted, and the policy does not count that as an affirmative, absolutely not.
Well, would our policy committee check on that, please? Just somebody make a note, just so we get that clarified. Because I know Robert Rules of Order, and we're supposedly operating under Robert Rules of Order with the exception of when it states otherwise in our bylaws. It does say that abstentions count wherever the majority of the votes were. Michelle, you got it there?
I have it here, but I don't
Well, it may take a while to find that.
abstention from voting.
Let's bring it up next week.
I don't ever recall putting the abstentions as an affirmative or a negative. I think they were just, you had 3 categories at that point.
Sure. No. Jill?
So the budgetary process has a different voting balance than the rest of the votes that we do?
Yes.
Voting on money.
There are very specific requirements around certain types of motions.
Okay.
They require 2/3 majority to pass.
Okay.
Adoption of the budget, purchase of land, removal of an administrator from an administrative position are some of the kinds of things that require a supermajority to pass.
Okay.
But an ordinary motion or resolution wins by a simple majority.
And when you say it requires 2/3, then on our board, that would require 7 votes for that resolution.
If the Jamesburg person can vote.
No, we just.
Because 2/3 of 10 is more than 6, which means you have to go to 7.
I don't think you mean a supermajority is like if you make a motion to, there's certain Robert rules that require, I know, to table a motion indefinitely, or to stop discussion on a motion.
Right.
Okay, that requires a supermajority.
But there are very specifics outlined in 18A that say you need a 2/3 majority vote, affirmative vote of the board to do the following things, and they're very
That's
specific.
right, I know what you're saying,
Okay.
exactly, but we have never done those.
Well, you've adopted the budget,
But that's 6.
that's 6. But there are some things that are 2/3, so you just have to be aware of those, and I know that Mike is.
Refunding is an example. That's,
Right.
that's a supermajority. Sale of bonds, very big, impactful things.
Purchase of
Yes,
property.
Yes.
And that's
What about the hiring of
Is this-
superintendent?
Mike, is this stuff
Nope.
in the policy?
But to
Our
remove
policy?
an
Policy.
assistant
Right, super.
superintendent is.
I'm sorry?
It's all in the policy.
Oh, to remove someone.
Yes.
I see,
It
okay.
isn't, you don't have to.
All right, is there any other
but you
business?
should.
Mr. Prezioso?
I think that we should have Mary come to the meetings, because I'm convinced that if we knew, or some of the members knew, that there was a majority needed, they would not have abstained. There's different information there. So this is not the first time this happened, if I'm not mistaken. So by her being here, the questions could be asked before we take a vote instead of after the meeting. Because there's some people here that are experienced. I'm a one-term member. There's some members here that are experienced. They know the more rules than I do, and we're at a disadvantage. But if the council is here, we have an opportunity to ask the questions.
Mr. Braverman?
There's a list put out, I think by New Jersey school boards, tells you exactly how many votes you need for every situation.
And I had Mr. Gorski send that list when I was board
Yeah,
president last year to
That
every
comes,
member of the board.
that comes during orientation.
I have that list in my regular board book.
Right.
And I've complied with that every meeting for 6
Right.
years now. There's never been an instance, of course, to my knowledge, where we've broken that requirement.
And just to put this to bed, you can't bring it up again to reconsider unless you are a yes vote.
Oh, I don't think anybody's bringing it up to reconsider. At least I didn't interpret it that way. I think there's just some people that are a little displeased with the way things happened tonight, okay?
Win some and lose some. I've
No,
lost a lot.
You're correct, but they're just simply registering, their opinions on things. Okay, any other board business? All right, then, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Oh, we didn't have our second public forum.
The meeting is now adjourned.